Who might be watching, this is a work session, so it's not a regular business session, and that means we don't make final binding decisions, although we may give direction to staff and have votes on that. Mostly opportunity just to exchange some information, get some information, and exchange ideas. So with that, first item up on our agenda is public comment on any item, whether on our agenda or not. And so I know we've got at least one or two people out there, so we'll open up for public comment. Ask that you tell us your name and try to keep your comments and your address, and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, unless you're a former council member, and then we'll give you an extra 15 seconds or something like that. Okay. Somebody's keeping track of the timer here, so that may give you a certain inside advantage. But anyway, former council member Danny Tricky, welcome. Danny.
Council, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I will say this, that as a former debater, if you limit me to 50 seconds, I can squeeze everything in there.
No, thank
but
you.
You're not going to understand a damn thing I say.
Oh.
I think it occurred to me, so while I was on council, I said over and over and over again, we have to look at how our information flows through the system, and figure out what the holes are and how to patch them and put them together. It occurred to me recently that my experience having done that at Citibank, Verizon, and to a lesser degree AOL Time Warner, I was saying things that made total sense in my head. But I didn't think that most of you were experiencing, have been in places where you experience exactly how that stuff works and why it really matters. Business processes have been a huge part of what we've been doing for a very, very, very long time. Probably one of the seminal moments in that was when Henry Ford said, hey, let's systematize how we're building cars. Let's put it down and make a specific process so that all the parts are the same, they come to the same person, they get plugged in the same way, and something comes out at the end of it. So that is one really good example on the manufacturing side of what a business process is. Since the digital age has come along, that whole process has just changed tremendously. And any business that's out there today that is worth its salt tracks all of that, how their information moves through their organizations, how decisions are made, and the process of looking at that stuff allows them to do fine-tuning, fixing problems, and a whole bunch of more things. If we want accountability, we need to be able to publish data real time about what's going on inside of our government. Same thing with transparency. Same thing with cost reduction. Same thing with compliance with things. Those tools exist and have existed in the business world for the last 2 generations. It is time for us to bring the city of Billings in compliance with these types of information and decision-making standards and, quote unquote, run government like a business. So I urge you to take a look at the information that I've presented you, and I really urge you to take some action to start mapping how our data moves through from citizens to the government and back and forth in different departments.
Thank you very much, Danny. I'll just mention to members of the public, we've been given a 30-page or so white paper prepared by former Councilmember Tricky, and if anybody's interested in getting a copy, just send one of us an email. We have access to that, or send one to you.
I'm happy to come back at any time.
Very good. Thank you. We'll take a look. Next, Becca.
Hello, Mayor, council members. My name is Rebecca Knoll. I live at 1109 Lewis. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Community Development Division at a time when maybe you're hearing a lot of things that are going wrong about city departments. I wanted to come and offer a comment of support for all of the work that this department accomplishes. I've had the privilege of working as a volunteer alongside city staff in this department for almost 8 whole years now. Next month is the end of my term. And throughout that time, I've seen just so many demonstrations of deep commitment to public service and so much knowledge and just a willingness to continually learn and be better. And so at a time when maybe you guys are sick of hearing all the things that suck about Billings, community development is like a kind of a little feather in your cap right now. They're great. The work that they do is amazing. And the amount that they can accomplish with only 3 positions, well, 4, hopefully, is phenomenal. I've heard some maybe lamenting from members of council about how the programs that our department administers don't do enough, or they don't make a difference, or it doesn't really matter that much. And it's really true that it's pretty much it's a paltry amount of money. It's fairly insignificant. But passing up on that money would be a disservice to the people that live here. So I urge you to continue to support the work that this department does for the city. And I thank you all for your work that you do for us. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, and thank you for your service on the Community Development Board, including as chairperson. You'll be missed. Any other public comment on items either on our agenda or not on our agenda this evening? We'll have an opportunity for public comment after each of the agenda items later if you do want to hold off. No one's coming forward, so close this period of public comment. And before we jump into our 5 regular items on our agenda, Chris, I believe you had a report or other things, and I know you wanted to talk about the utility bill situation, so
yes.
I'll turn it over to you.
Sorry, Mayor, and thank you for indulging us tonight. I just, as you're well aware, the audit is underway. I'm not here tonight to talk about the audit. They're doing their thing. But we can see a light, believe it or not, through these challenges. And yet, as we get down to resolution here, bills, there's going to be a couple billing cycles that are going to come right on top of each other. And so I think a lot of phones are going to ring. I know ours have, and we're anticipating that. So I want to, Debbie's going to walk us through the latest so we can see and hopefully you can understand as the questions come in how to direct folks and have them look at their bill and specifically understand what they got in the mail last week was primarily for the month of September, so that we're still behind, but we're going to catch up here real quickly so that here into December, January, and February, people can see a very consistent, they'll be very familiar with what they saw for many, many years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Debbie. She kind of walks us through some things here.
Okay, so everybody has this in front of you. I know it looks like a lot, but it's really a pretty straightforward spreadsheet. So we're going to walk through just one cycle so you guys can see really what's on this. So if you look at just cycle, what this is basically going back to the beginning of our system. So we actually went live with this the end of May. And so we had a billing cycle, and you can see that on this spreadsheet. We had a billing cycle go out from 6/13 to 7/5 in our new system. It was a 30-day cycle. Everything was fine. And then what happened was we had, because it was a new system, it kicked out several thousand exceptions, which means things that just didn't fit kind of the criteria that we had that said this bill's ready to go. So it kicked out several thousand exceptions that we had to manually look at every single one. That's what pushed us into that next bill, which is the 825 bill. That's what pushed us into that 60-day bill. So since that 60-day bill, we've had a 30-day bill go out, and then we had another 30-day bill go out. And so we've had two 30-day bills since that 60, and we're sending the last 30-day bill before we're kind of back to normal. So the problem with the 30-day bills was they were still too far back. So in the past, at the end of June, we would bill a couple of weeks after June for June bills. Now we're billing for 2 months ago. And so we need to catch that up. That was a lot to say. Let's just run through this. It'll make more sense when we walk through it. So what you've got in this packet are some sample bills, and they are cycles 1 through 5. So we're just going to start with cycle 1, which is the first bill that you have here. So on 6/13, this bill went out, and it covered a service date of 31 days for your water and sewer. And you can see that because it says service period up on the top, which is 4/29 to 5/30. And then the sewer covered, or the stormwater covered 5/9 to 6/12 because we were still in that perfect 30-day window. And so it was 1390. Everybody's looked right at 1390, and stormwater wasn't on it. So that bill was all good. This is a new bill in the new billing system. Everything was great. Then the next one. This is the one where you can see, okay, we didn't. Okay, so the next bill is dated 8/25, and you can see that we're looking in the brown. So just the first, we're just looking at this first section of this spreadsheet. Are you showing that up there? That's did not come out well at all color-wise, but we're just looking at the brown or orange here. So don't look beyond that. So the 8/25 bills went out, and they covered 2 months. So water and sewer was 5/30 to 7/29. You can see that up in the corner, right under the top blue box. The solid waste covered 6/12 to 8/23, so it actually covered 2.5 months because it went bill date to bill date. And then the stormwater covered July and August. We can go through each one of these, but basically this is what you've got in front of you, is to show how these bills, service date to service date, match up. So there's no double billing. The water and sewer are a little bit different than the stormwater, but this spreadsheet will show you exactly how to kind of walk through somebody's bills in every cycle. So it's kind of a little cheat sheet. Here's the part we wanted to talk about tonight. If you look at cycle 1, bill date 11/20, that's this week. You can see that's in the brown right there. That's this week. You can see beside it, it's got a 7. That means we billed cycle 1 week ago. We're going to bill cycle 1 again this week. So they'll have 7 days between bills. That is the only way to get us caught up on our bills. So once we do that one, that is the last one that's actually a manual bill production. As of cycle 2, which is 11/21, we are back in automatic bills. But we have to do this compressed cycle in order to get back to automatic bills. And so it is, the dates work, but they are not going to be easy to understand, and they're not going to be easy to, it's not going to be popular, obviously, with anybody getting a bill right on the heels of another bill. We don't have late fees. We don't have penalties. We're encouraging people to just take their time to pay these. But the only way to get back onto automatic billing is to have a compressed cycle. So we wanted to talk about that tonight just so that you knew what was coming. We have a lot of people manning phones and being available for our customers. But the more information we can get out, and I would just encourage people like this, go back and check those service dates so you can see what the bills are really for. Do you have anything else you wanted me to hit on?
I just want to reinforce that last point, and I'm just looking at, I think it's it's consistent with the spreadsheet. Selfishly, I understand my own bill better, but it fits right in there because I happen to be in cycle 2. So that bill that I just got last Friday morning was from, the service period was the month of September, 9/5 to 10/7. The bill Debbie's saying I'm going to get next week is going to now be for the month of October.
10/7 to 11/7, yep.
Which makes perfect sense because, right, historically, if you were to go back and look at your bill over the years, you'll find your billing period is only between 10 and 14 days after the actual use of the water. We've never been 30, 45 days in arrears in getting those out. So the part of the squish here for sure was to get this done before the end of the year and before the month of December. So that as they get their December, January, February, and on, they will see a very customary bill and cycle. So, yeah.
Sorry, can I just add that if we were to say delay this move to automated, so if we were just gonna keep kind of pushing into these later dates for a while, we would have to continue manually doing the bills until we decide it's time to automate them. So this is our chance to get back on schedule. And not getting back on schedule is a lot of work and manual work. And of course, with manual work always comes a lot of potential for problems.
Okay, thank you very much. Debbie, are you open for questions?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to start us off with one, and then Councilmember Kennedy and Councilmember Gulick. I recognize this is about timing of bills.
Yes.
And that's the primary focus. But you and your partner have been looking now at thousands of individual bills. Earlier, there was discussion about and concern about possible overbilling based on inadequate or inaccurate metering or charging people for too much water was the concern. Even though it's a little different for what you're talking about here, is it still are we seeing any sort of a pattern? And we'd want to reserve judgment until the audit comes through, right? But so far, based on your own personal experience, are you seeing a pattern that would indicate a widespread inaccuracy in the software programs that would result in overcharging people for their water? Are we seeing that pattern?
So we have found one thing, and I'll explain that. As far as a widespread software calculation type of issue, no, we have not found anything yet. As you said, the audit's ongoing, so hopefully in the next month or so, we should get that result. What we have seen, when we did cycle 2 60-day bills, so this is primarily the West End, we had about 8,000 bills that were estimated. We estimate pretty much every month. There's a few bills that we have to estimate because we can't get a meter read on them. There was 8,000 bills that were inadvertently estimated instead of the meter being read. So when we went out, when we sent the 30-day bill, the meters were read, which meant the 3-month amount was correct, but it meant that 30-day bill a lot of times was as big as that 60-day bill. The problem there is the tiers, as you can imagine, got messed up. So we've looked at quite a few of the 8,000, about 40% of them make enough difference that the tiers would change. And so we are gonna have to go through and recalculate those. People will get a credit. We are not gonna charge people if we undercharged them, but they will get a credit if we overcharged. We did about 40 of them just the other day to see where it was. We were talking $1.30 to $1.50 on most accounts. There are some accounts though that are significant. These were the really, really high usage that vary dramatically from last year. So there are some that are gonna get large credits. I would say on the order of a couple hundred. So that's the one thing we have found across the board that is an issue that we need to go back and credit those accounts.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Gulick, and Councilmember Roy.
Debbie, I just want to use my,
Sure.
my bill to ask the question. Last month from August 5th through September 5th, I had a solid waste service at 2509. For the same amount, September 5th to October 7th, the solid waste was 1204, which is a significant decrease in that. Solid waste is the same price every month, correct?
So it's based on bill date right now. So it is being prorated. And that's what you've got on this sheet. I put how much the proration for each cycle is on each bill. So if you got a $12.04 bill, then it was because your billing period was only 3.5 weeks versus a full 4 weeks. So the solid waste is being prorated right now. As of these December bills, it goes back to $14.50 because we won't be prorated anymore.
The solid waste does not follow the service period of
Does
your-
not. It follows the bill date, which is what that spreadsheet is I gave you.
The other question that I have is, the sewer service seems to be fairly consistent, but you're going to only bill for a week, our next bill that we receive. So are you going to leave off the sewer service?
So the next bill will be a 30-day period. It'll be water and sewer will be 30 days. Your solid waste will only be about a week or 2 weeks, depending on how far apart it is. But your water and sewer are 30 days. That's what we have to do, is catch up to that last month that we haven't billed yet. So water and sewer will be 30.
That's a real big problem. Are all of these things going to be on the same service period coming forward?
Yes. Our solid waste has always been 30 days. Our water and sewer has always been 30 days, and our storm's always been 30. Well, it will be 30 days now. The only reason they got messed up, of course, was this, like I talked about, those exceptions after the first billing cycle.
And that's really what a lot of people have had a lot of problems with.
So fundamentally, Councilmember Kennedy, remember that, as I used in the example for the bills we just got last week, they were for usage primarily for the month of September. So even though there's going to be a week or 10 days only between these two billing periods, as Debbie said, it's for then the month of October. So the period is 30 days. The time gap between getting the bills is the only thing that changed at the 7 days, so that going forward, we're on the right cycle.
Thank you, Councilor Kulik, and then Councilor Owen.
So I didn't know we had cycles, so now I'm starting to sense that we spread things out. So
Right.
we have to do it all at the same time. Is there a way for us as council members to know what cycles, or can we look at the bill and know what cycle they're on?
So what we put on social media this week or last week was that if you take that October bill date, that one is different for every cycle. So if you got a bill date of 10/10, you're in cycle 1. If you're 10/16, you're in cycle 2. That being said, they're kind of geographic, but over the years, they've kind of gotten a little bit different. Cycle 2 is your west end. Cycle 4 is the west part of the Heights. Cycle 5 is Heights Water District in the Heights. 1 and 3 are a combination of like Midtown, South Side. They're a little bit more intermixed in 1 and 3. So that's generally where most of those are.
Thank you very much, Councilor Owen.
Thank you. Mayor, Debbie, I have 2 questions. First of all, I think it might be helpful to just go through again the challenges with the little charts on
Right.
here. Because I look at like this very first bill you've got, shows what looks like pretty ordinary usage. And then on page 2, there's no usage in July and like this massive spike in August. So just go through us again the problem with the
Okay.
charts.
And then the third bill, you'll see it's gone.
Yeah, and then.
Yeah.
I call
the,
your attention to, but go
Right.
ahead.
So the graph is simply an illustration. It's not used in the calculations at all, but it wasn't pulling in correctly. So we told, and that's the billing vendor. That is not our software that's the print vendor, not the billing software. So we have 2 different vendors there. They couldn't get that graph to line up just right. So we said, take it off until we get all the bills straightened out. Then let's work on the graph and put it back on there. So we will be putting the graph back on after we can get that to look right.
So if I could just follow up, could you elaborate a little bit more on how it could be that the same data can go into the billing software conceivably correctly, but not to the print vendor correctly?
So everything in all of our systems is set up to do 30-day bills. And they're set up to be on this 5-cycle system 2 weeks after. I mean, it's set up, to work that way. In order to make it work for these that we're manually doing, you'd have to manipulate every one of those. You could do that, but since we're going back onto our normal cycle, it will work as soon as we're back on our normal cycle. So it's just the fact that we're not on a normal cycle, it's not able to pull it appropriately, and I can't get more in depth on that. That's just been what I've understood to date. Everything we've done on these bills had to be put in manually because we're not on that automated system yet. As of later this week, we will be back on that system. So those things should come in easier now.
And so then my next question is, under this bar of what do I need to know, it looks like this is a customizable message.
Yes.
Why are we not putting in the variations in service dates so that people can understand? Because like, even if I look at the service period here, it obviously, as you've said, doesn't align necessarily with the solid waste, and there's no place for the solid waste service period to be captured. Why can't we make this a little bit more detailed by cycle?
And so we can. So we have changed that message a little bit every month. You'll look in some of these and you'll see they're a little bit different. Like the next bills that are going out, pretty much all it's gonna say on there is check your service date, check your bill date. These are not duplicates, check the date. So we're gonna take a lot of that stuff that's in there now and we're gonna try our best to try to convey this information about the compressed schedule in there.
But the,
So-
sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't
No.
mean to cut you off. The only place where the service period is captured is for water.
Right.
It's not captured for solid waste. And so no one would know that they're having a different billing period for solid waste than water. Couldn't we put that in the?
We could put it in the box, yes.
Okay.
Yep. We talked about changing the bill template itself, but that doesn't make sense because in a month, we're gonna be back to normal and it's not gonna make any sense because it's gonna be the same time period. But yes, that box, we could definitely use to put some of that information in there.
Okay, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Ripsis has his little yellow hand up. Councilmember Ripsis?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Debbie, I'm just wondering, I'm looking at my bill dated August 25th. I think I'm in cycle 3 because my service date starts with June 13th. But that bill is a 1-month bill. It goes through July 12th. And then my next bill, dated 10/24 actually, is our 2-month bill. Is there some reason some of these might be flipped between the 1-month and the 2-month bills? Or is the spreadsheet maybe not right for everybody? Did I just get into some weird type of cycle where I'm different than? what
Yes,
your
you
spreadsheet
are
is?
actually special. So yes, and I should have said that early on. This is right for about 95% of the bills. The other ones are those exceptions I talked about that keep coming out of this. Every time we bill, we end up with this group of exceptions. For some reason, your bill must have been pushed out as an exception and then we had to go through and manually do it. So I can't tell you what it is about your bill that changed that, but this is right for probably 95% of our bills. It's not right for 100% of our bills because of all the exceptions we've had.
Okay, I can see in total it's right, and everything kind of came out in the wash, but it was just different than what your spreadsheet was. So
Right.
It is good to know that if some people are out there looking and they're trying to match up their bills to these dates, there are a few of us out there that won't match.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you. Debbie, you're in front of everybody now. When do you think we'll go back just to a normal schedule and the world will be okay?
So this week, we go back to our system being automated and it's pulling. So if you look at this spreadsheet, on the 5th box down, everything, the green, the blue, the pink, and the gray are actually the dates you would normally have gotten a bill back before the billing system. So those 4 are actually on the dates you'd normally get for the time period you'd normally get. So those are actually, as of this week, we are back to that. The problem is they're so close behind the last bill. So that's really what this is. But these, from the green over, we are back on our normal schedule. You'll get it. And then you look down below where I have the yellow, it says return to normal. Those are 30 days apart. They are on the date you'll normally get it. So if you normally got it the second week of the month, you'll get it back the second week of the month again.
So in December, the world will go back to normal, you're saying?
It is, yes. These are going back to normal for the time period, but not for the compression. Yeah, but December should be normal, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Kennedy, you had a follow-up, Chair?
Debbie, just a quick question. On these bills, you show us the usage, the K gallons, and then you have what the current monthly charge is. You also have the West End Water and Plant reservoir fee, solid waste service, sewer service, stormwater, water service line repair fee. Why don't we have what we're charging for each tier for a residential customer and a commercial customer, so they know exactly if I have 4 K gallons on this month, it's $3, $4 a K gallon. If I had this month I had 12, I jump all over on mine, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but what they do, and then when I look over here, West End Water Plant and Reservoir, The first one I said was $2.40. The month before that was $5.80, $5.44. So it's all over. So is there a way we can show people what you're charging so they can just figure it out too and make sure it's correct?
So I would love it if we took that off the bills. That is by far the biggest question we get, is that West End fee. That is exactly 8.5% of what your water bill is every month. So it's going to change every month depending on what your water bill is. That was a motion by council several years ago. Some of you probably remember that. The council member wanted to make sure everybody knew that that West End plant was happening, that we were moving forward, that money was going toward it. And so that's why we have that there. It's simply a calculation. It's 8.5% of the overall fee. So we can write that, or if you guys want to take it off, it really, on a normal month, it's one of the biggest questions we get month after month after month. So
But it
I don't
would
know if there's
be
still value
added,
to it.
correct? If we took it off, it'd still be added in.
It's still in there. It's in there now. But we just pull it out so people know the West End is happening, was the thought behind that.
Can we change this so people know what the cost is? If the West End, it's 8.5%
Sure.
of your total bill?
Yep, we
And
can-
that's how they calculated that?
Sure.
That's the biggest question. People want to know where you got the numbers. And they also want to know, okay, I went above the 10. What's my, am I in tier 2? And what are you charging me for tier 2?
Yep, and our old bills used to have tiers on them. The new bills will have it after we get everything, the template updated. So we'll have tiers again when we get kind of through this.
But even the old bill did not have what you're charging.
For the tiers,
Yeah. I have the old one, and it says Tier 1 is 0 to 10 gallons. Tier 2 is 11 to 22 K gallons. Tier 3 is 23 to 43 K gallons, and 4 is above 75. But there's no cost of what it is. So if you have 75 gallons, what is the price that they would pay?
Right.
Is it $7, and then you multiply $7 times 75?
we'll look at
That's-
adding that to the new bill. Yep.
Thank you.
Just to second that, the whole idea is to discourage usage at higher tiers, and that would help people to understand literally what it costs them. So,
Okay.
Debbie, if you could just, I'm sorry, Councilor Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. I've seen this question come up, Debbie, from time to time. The Montana sewer quality fee, is that an annual fee, monthly, quarterly? What is that?
Annual.
Okay. And just real quick, because this came up as Councilmember Kenny brought this up about the tiers being on old bills. It goes from tier 3 from 23 to 43 K gallons, but then it says over 75 K gallons is tier 4. So what's in between 43 K and 75 K?
Yeah, that's not right. That's why it's not on there anymore.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, we needed to get that fixed.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Rowan?
Mayor, are we wrapping up this discussion?
Soon.
Okay, so I just wanted, Chris, there has been a lot of misinformation floating around the community with respect to the audit specifically, that we're only checking 30 accounts. Could you just run through for the public again the scope of the review so that everyone understands it's not just that we're checking 30 meters?
Absolutely. So what the confusion there is, what the audit company came in and actually went into homes, photographed meters, readers on the outside, checked the accuracy, verified of that system. That is not the extent of their audit. Their audit includes reviewing the entire billing system. Now, there's random selection of hundreds, and in some cases, a few thousand in the various areas. And they're gonna do a lot better job than I to get that, to explain why that methodology and those numbers make sense. But it is anyone out there with this room, and I have seen it on social media too, that we're only checking 30, that's absolutely not correct.
Okay, thank you. Debbie, there was some concern about auto payments not being reflected on the bill with bills being compressed. I assume that all get worked out, people will get credit, but can you address that specifically and reassure people that their payments aren't going to get lost somehow?
Absolutely. So we got a lot of those calls today. The last bill that was received by this group of people was 10:30 with a bill due date of 11:15. The next bill was dated 11:15. So literally, if you look at the ledgers, the auto pays came out on the 15th and the new bill was developed on the 15th. So they don't reflect that payment. And that's going to happen for the next cycle as well, because it's 7 days and 8 days. But those do come in, they're just not reflected because we're pulling the data out before the bills get in, the payments get in. So I would say wait one more month, make sure it shows up on there. If you paid online, everybody has a bank statement they can go back to. If there's ever a question, you can contact us, but wait one more month and they'll all be on there.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Gulick?
Or, I'm sorry, the online portal is updated daily. So if you do get on the online portal, you'll be able to see your payment right away.
Okay, and what do people need to do to be able to access the online portal?
Go to our website. There's a big blue button and instructions, step-by-step instructions on how to get into your portal.
Okay, Councilor Gulick and Councilor Nishitz.
Debbie had mentioned that we have disaggregate that West End water plant and reservoir. It does seem like something, as far as I'm concerned, we could remove off of there. Disaggregate. Of course, the amount of money is still be there, but I think at this point it's just part of our system, and I think we don't call out other parts of the system anymore. So as far as I'm concerned, I'd be fine in taking that off now at this point. So
Thank you for your opinion. I think we probably have enough on our plate right now, but and there are other reasons to have it on there, I suppose, because then you know when it's going to come off, but or you'll notice if it comes off. Councilor Rennes?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Debbie, what about those of us who have not been able to get in to the portal? And are you finding many people trying and not working? I know I couldn't get in on one of my accounts. And then also when it comes to auto pay, and it's in the stack, you'll get to it eventually, my email I sent in. Mine auto pay there was sufficient time between bills, but it said it was going to be paid, but it didn't come out of my bank account yet, and it's still, so it stacked it on the next bill. So I'm assuming it'll come out in the next bill, but are you seeing others, or is this just mine that happened to?
I think you're special too.
I know, I'm special too.
So as far as the auto pay, the dates get a little bit different depending on bank dates and that kind of thing. With Veterans Day, I know there was some delays on some of that. But we can check on that. As far as getting online, there's a couple ways. When you walk through it a certain way, I've been able to get everyone online. So I can contact you and we can walk through it. There's a couple of things that if it doesn't match up perfectly, it doesn't like it. So as of yesterday, all of our I can't get in the portal calls have been returned. So you must not have gotten into that stack, but auto pay, change of address, all that kind of stuff is getting returned in 1 to 2 business days. The high bills are taking a couple of weeks, so.
Okay, thank you.
And on that, Debbie, to access the portal, don't you need an account number, but the account numbers had changed, and you got the message, call us, and most of us don't want to call you because we're afraid it'll take a couple weeks or we don't want to bother you. Is there a workaround that? Do I have that right? In order to access the portal, you need to have a current account number.
And it's on your bill. So if you get an email or the text, or if you get a paper bill, it's the new account number is on there. It starts with a 3. So if you have an account number that starts with a 3, it's a new account number.
Okay, I'll have to call them just because I don't have the bill, so I don't have the account number, so I'm caught in this catch-22.
You can call us. A lot of those we return same day if you're just looking for an account number.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate your efforts and your time. We need to get on to a regular agenda. So we will do that now. First item up is our crisis response unit update, and Assistant Chief Jason Banfield, I guess, is our presenter. Jason.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. How are you guys tonight? So last meeting we were here, Zach and I were kind of charged with attending the state crisis response unit teams across the state. And we were up there for Bozeman for a couple days. We were able to speak to other teams, other cities, and the research people who collect the data and also have DPHHS in the room. We did learn a lot of things in that space and how things are happening across our state and the different models that are functioning across the state and their pluses and minuses to those. So during this process, I believe you guys had to start looking at what models we would want in our community. So we've given, we don't always have to do anything, right? So right now, we can just do nothing and keep doing business the same way we are doing it now. If you look at our high utilizer study, we looked at 90 patients, that cost us $10 million. What wasn't in that study was the fire department's cost of running an MRT or a large fire truck to those same calls. So we've been working with Sarah Keller up at communications with Dr. Keller. She's the head of communications. She's updating that high utilizer study, and we've moved it to 100 patients with that. We're at 82 of those. It's take a lot of time and effort to collate that data as we're trying to keep HIPAA issues and other issues, mental health confidentialities separated out so we can make sure we're doing this correctly and get the correct data. So on that, we've brought back to you, again, you don't have to do anything right now, but we've brought back you 5 different models of possible service. So the first one would be and I'm just going to start with number 5 first, is with just a crisis intervention team. And basically what that is you train most of your law enforcement officers to do de-escalation and then move those patients to other supporting services. And I believe in our community, that is not our goal. You guys can tell me if that's correct or not. We want those officers to get off those calls as long as possible. We don't want them trying to get those patients into housing when they're needed on other calls. So I feel like we can move that off that model. We can move another model off based upon a co-responder model, where you put a clinician with a police department. When this was first brought to you through the CPSM study, none of those models were chosen to support to start with. And I believe the Billings Police Department's busy enough right now trying to handle the short staffing and the call volume they're dealing with to support that. It is viable in other communities, and there are grant funds that can support some of that. So keep that in mind. There's a consultant model where you can just typically hire this out. Bozeman is using this model right now. They are spending $60,000 a month using a third party to provide the clinicians to their community and responding to those calls. Now, the last 2 models, I believe, is the first model, as we're going to talk about, is mobile crisis unit. That's the first one we did with our partners with Rimrock. That model did not work well. We had some timing issues with payment from the state. We had some recruitment and retention issues with the clinicians in supporting that. And at the time, Rimrock was under the whole unraveling of Medicaid in the state. So their business model, they wanted to pull back into their business model, support their original business model, and not do this work anymore at that time. So the next one, that's why we've come to this, is for recommendation, is the behavioral health community paramedicine model, which is upgrading that same model and using a paramedic with a clinician. And we will still have to find a partner in this community to support that as we move forward. And the reason I believe we need to use that model is we have so many coexisting medical conditions with these behavioral health patients. So those are the recommendations. Again, we do not have to move forward on this tonight. We can have some separate conversations individually so you guys can get more background information as we move forward. But I would love to take some questions from you guys tonight and maybe head down a direction you guys are wanting to pursue.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Kennedy.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to the chief.
Sure.
Chief, what's being recommended is a very costly model. You have a high overtime budget that you had problems last year. You're going to have some problems this year. where do you find the money to do something like this?
Well, at this time, this does not come out of anything of our operational budget. This is all grant funded at this time, so there's been $0 spent out of our operational budget for crisis response.
So you have enough money, or there's enough grant money to do this?
That is correct. And Chief Banfield can speak to that in more detail.
Okay.
So approximately a year and a half ago, why we pushed forward to move some of this was Montana Health Network offered some dollars to provide for certified integrated healthcare worker support. So what we ended up doing was getting grant dollars to support the EMT side. So the budget for the city, when we first started this program, was about $240,000. I believe that's 2 meals that was supporting it. In that process, we got this thing set up and started, which was the cost of the vehicle and some other pieces. But what we received back in grants was $129,000 for 23-24, another $51,000 for 24-25, and we just submitted some more dollars, around 40 to 60, depends on what's left in the coffers through the state to support that. So when it comes to the EMT side, we've spent little to no dollars to support that.
Councilmember Aspenlighter, Councilmember Boyette?
So, Chief Banfield, those grant dollars don't go on forever. What's the sunset, and when does this have to then roll into presumably your operational budget? Do you have a
Correct.
timeline on that?
So when you're looking at these grant dollars, we're allowed access to bill back to the state another $500,000 to support this work. But a program like this, to run it for a 12 hours around the clock time, is about $800,000, okay? That's yearly. You will get, based upon Medicaid dollars back, you're looking at about 38 cents on the dollar, typical of medical billing. So you're looking at about 40% of those dollars coming back. So there will have to be some supplementation of and supporting this.
Go ahead.
But when? Like, when are we going to run into that?
I think basically you've got probably about 14 months left of dollars to use this. Does that make sense?
Councilmember Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. In our old program, we had EMTs. In this new program under this, we would be using paramedics. Are they the same, or is that a whole different animal that we don't have? What are the costs related to that?
The cost is a little bit in personnel, but what it does is it reduces the risk. If you start looking at some of these patients, and I'll give you one patient in our community has a neurologic issue, and that's now compounding and putting his mental health into where we're having to evaluate him constantly. And during that process, we're trying to get this patient Medicaid funding to support some home health care, and he's declining to the point with the medical pieces that we're having to reevaluate him, and it takes time for Medicaid, 30 to 90 days. So we're always constantly behind with that. Now, if we're only sending an EMT, we're not looking at all those things those co-responding medical pieces, which are obviously, the hypertensive crisis, the blood glucose issues, all of those things that can affect your mental health.
Councilmember Boyette?
So is that an additional training factor for the same people we have, or do we have to hire a whole different person?
Right now, we can hire a whole different person, but the Board of Regents is supporting job hardening programs. Right now, we've sent, I think, 6 of our EMTs through the paramedic course at no cost.
Councilmember Nays, Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor.
And then both council members online. Sorry, Councilmembers Rupsis and Shaw. So, Councilmember Nays.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, what other, I guess, you mentioned that others were using these behavioral community with the police, which I probably agree that we need the police officers out there, but obviously they're doing that. Was it only working in like smaller communities? What really, where was that embraced at?
I think that was because they had an opportunity to fund and use some criminal dollars for the grant funding on the backside. So when we went to Spokane, there was a clinician that was paid through grants and had some access to criminal funding for moving those patients away from obviously crime and supporting that. And then the other side was supported on the medical side through the fire department. So sometimes you would end up with 2 clinicians on scene.
I see. Okay, and so were these permanent dollars or just, again, short-term grant funding?
Short-term grant dollars. Everyone is across the state is eventually going to have to figure out what is going to be important to them to offset those dollars. You're going to get some Medicaid funding, but each community across the state is going to be impacted by finding these dollars to support these programs.
Okay, great. Mayor, that leads me to the next question then, is because right now the city along with the county, 2 mills are put into the county for mental health issues within the county and city. We're 70% of the county. So that's permanent funding. And so have you talked to the county about this plan and how this can be integrated into what the county's planning or how they work with the crisis center and other things that they do for the mental health so that we can work together? And then if we have to, as a county, because county residents come to the city and are bothered, by the same kind of issue that everyone is to help these residents, how can, is that a way that could be permanent funding instead of the city actually doing this, maybe piloting it, but having the county prepared to take it over if it's successful? Because the last one obviously is not working well because of some other issues. So have you have you had conversations with the county about this?
I haven't had any conversations. We've been focused solely inside the city limits and supporting the BUFSA.
Okay. All right. The BUFSA is the county, so I hope you would be talking to the county about how you're serving this in the county as well. Mayor, I have one last question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, and then
Well,
Councilmember
maybe
Rowan.
I'll reserve that, maybe not last, but for now. So this first plan that we did, the mobile crisis units we did, you mentioned that it kind of failed because we didn't have a partner. We couldn't get a partner in there to work. But yet, when you came to the BHCP program, you said we have to have a partner, same as the first one. And so if the first one failed because we don't have a partner, how is this recommendation you're giving going to succeed if we can't get a partner in the city?
And we will still have to go out and look for one. And because of having that oversight and supervision through the clinical side, you will still have to have the referral piece to get access to the Medicaid dollars. That's what DPHS is pushing back onto the local communities to make sure they do. So that obviously, we can start our own crisis response model, but that doesn't mean it's gonna hit the clinicians and be the correct people that are accredited to do that work, right? So that's why they want that model, and that's why they're pushing back.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm going to kind of pick up where Roy left off here in this conversation about partnerships. So I'm concerned, I have been concerned since the start, that having a single partner is not going to work, that we would be better off with multiple partners who can swap, who can share the load, who can refer clients to different services. And specifically, it gets to my larger concern that we're still envisioning this, I think, as predominantly a response unit, not sort of an active patrol unit. And I understand wanting to be available when the call comes in to respond, but I'm concerned that that's not giving us enough throughput for any one provider to be able to justify the resource. Now, it's shocking to me that it's not giving us enough throughput, because I would think that we would have mental behavioral health crises every hour on the hour. And so I'm not understanding why we're responding to relatively few calls, but I think if that continues to be the case, we have to assume that partners can't do that full time. So can you talk through that a little? And then Mayor, I have one more question.
You're absolutely correct. And that was one of the defining pieces, I'm sure, for Rimrock. When you can only do 2 to 4 calls a day, that is not a good business model for them. And the referrals have to be there to support the backside of that. So you're absolutely right. Some more community involvement would be great to be part of this. Absolutely, the hospital should be involved. It is saving them some money on the recidivism into their ERs. So there does need to be some pressure and push back out to our community members to see if we can get that. And what was the other part of the question?
I think that kind of answers the question.
Okay.
But then secondly, I want to get to this idea of sort of leveling up to the paramedic. If I remember the data right, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of the calls the CRU responded to were housed and private insurance.
I would say you're looking at a good patient mix of about 40% being on Medicaid, some being on Medicare, and then the rest having private insurance. Now, that will hopefully change nationally as, these Medicaid programs prove that these large insurance companies should be paying for this. It's going to save money in the long run. And I believe Blue Cross Blue Shield is actually looking at supporting it right away.
I get you, but if I'm engaging in just sort of gross generalizations, if someone is A, housed, and B, covered by private insurance, the odds that they have regular access to ongoing medical care seem slightly higher than an unhoused population and a population entirely on Medicaid. So why are we seeing the need to level up on primary medical services in the particular demographic that we're responding to regularly?
Well, the other piece with this is if they're not busy, I do want to be I've already had some conversations with the hospitals. In your CPSM study, they talked about a community paramedicine program. So what I was going to try and do is if we can go to this next level, we can support that and see some of those patients that end up calling 911 at 2 a.m. because nobody saw them during the day. And I'm looking at a specific demographic of congestive heart failure patients right now. I'm working with Billings Clinic, Dr. Rodriguez, and we're looking to see if this is something that we can support them with. They had a program called Dispatch Health that was going out and doing that work, but again, their volume wasn't high enough on that side to support that too. So combining some of this may have a decent business model just to get some volume through a program.
I hear where you're coming from, Mayor, and I'll conclude here, but that seems to me like we're searching for solutions just to get money in the door, and it doesn't seem like we're actually targeting a behavioral health population. So I guess what I'd like to see is a model or a recommendation that is more proactive and that is targeting a more at-risk population. And that doesn't necessarily mean housed or unhoused, but I think we really need to get to the folks who are experiencing behavioral health issues and not just adding in people with physical health issues because it makes the model balance out. So as you're working on these recommendations, I'd like to see more proactivity and more targeted finding of people who are in need.
And there was also some limited responses in this program, because when we first started, if you remember, you guys said, let's do 6 months without any we have to have police there. We wanted co-response in that. We didn't want to go without them. Well, at about the 6 month mark, we redid the CAD system and we started attaching them to them besides just doing requests. So that business model started to pick up.
Okay, thank you. Councilmembers Rupsis, Shaw, and Joy. And then I have a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I want to keep going down this road because according to the information you gave us in the staff report and the information from the state that was in the presentation attached to the staff memo, it says mobile crisis units are solely made up of mental health professionals and or paraprofessionals. That's not what we had. That's inconsistent with the statement that says we've been running this mobile crisis unit throughout this pilot period. In fact, what we actually have been running is a behavioral health community paramedicine. According to the definitions that you gave us, which kind of came through the state's, white paper on that. I am struggling to understand why what we've seen in any data says the real problem here was that we had EMTs instead of paramedics. I haven't seen any data. We've heard a couple anecdotal stories. And like Councilmember Owen said, we're kind of searching for something to push this particular model. I'm not seeing it. Where is the justification for upskilling these positions? What have we learned throughout the pilot period that says this would have been great if only we'd have paramedics? Because I don't think that's where we fell down.
Well, and again, looking across the state, everybody's doing it a little bit differently. Like Bozeman has no medical piece to it whatsoever. They don't do any of that work. But the engine company up there or the ambulance then does the medical piece with that patient just like Billings Clinic does when you enter the ER. If you have a behavioral health issue there, you're first medically checked. You reduce the risk that they're having a medical issue, a stroke, a head injury, those things, and then you see the behavioral health piece. So it's just where that occurs in your community.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I don't know, is there any data, though, on this?
No, because we didn't track any of that medical data. That's not what we were doing in the first pieces of this response plan.
so where is this recommendation coming from? That really what we need to do is take the EMTs that we've hired and replace them with paramedics?
Well, I think it's due to the demographics of our community as we age out here in Billings. If you look at what's happening in our community and the volume of patients and the ages that we're seeing those patients, and I can get some of that data when we get everything back from the 100 high utilizers.
But, thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Shaw?
Thank you. Chief, I want to go back to the partner because I feel, at least my interpretation is that's sort of where things fell apart, is that our partner wasn't getting paid for 6 months because of the Medicaid reimbursements. They had a high level of turnover. Are there models working in the state? So putting aside the question of money, of who pays for this, which I know is in everyone's mind, but let's put that aside for just a quick second. Are there models in which a fire department are bringing in mental health professionals to do that work from the city side, so we aren't going out and looking for a partner? And I know that opens a whole can of worms of medical billing and all of that. I'm not even sure that I recommend it. I just would like to hear from you if you think that would be a more successful path for us to consider, because I don't read that in any of these options. So I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Well, there are, and it kind of depends on the state ruling and payment and what people are looking for in some reimbursement. So what you're starting to see through, even on the IFC, International Association of Fire Chiefs, they are starting to ask each other for job descriptions on hiring mental health professionals. So there are some larger cities in the country that are looking that way to do that. I don't know if that's the model we want to choose. Again, back to we have to step across into the supervision piece, we have to step across into the QA/QI piece, and then the billing piece. So that would add more cost to the program.
Yeah, so my follow-up question to that is, do you feel like that we have options for a partner out there? I mean, is Rimrock willing to reconsider this? Are there other options, or are we, I guess I'm kind of at a loss of who's going to partner with us on this.
There have been conversations at Substance Abuse Connect. We are 406 Recovery, Riverstone Health. They all want to hear how this could work for them and how it could be sorted out. Rimrock has not reached out afterwards, but they're here tonight in the room, so they could probably speak to if they wanted to get back into this work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good. Councilor Joy?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I wanted to, I guess it's kind of, this conversation is revolving around just certain issues, but I wanted to talk about the consultancy model that they use in Bozeman. You said that, you mentioned that the reason that wouldn't work here in Billings is because of the co-occurring, is that correct? You said the co-occurring is so prominent here in this community that the consultant model that is used in Bozeman would not work here. And so I wanted you to sort of expand on that, because I don't know in terms of the cost of the consultant model, if that's the determining factor, or if it's this co-occurring. So I'd like you to speak to that a little bit better, because I'm not quite sure I understand it. Thank you.
Sure. Bozeman right now obviously has the consultants doing this work for them and responding. They are not typically tied in with the initial response with 911. So in their system, police, fire, and EMS are still arriving first and then requesting them to come. At that point, then they're alleviated from the scene if that medical piece has been done and checked out. Again, someone is still looking at that patient medically to support that and rule out those risks. And why I say that is if we have a patient that is one stroke patient, and they're not referred properly, and we put them in a 23-hour facility for that mental health piece, and they're actually having a stroke, that's a big liability for our community. And that's why somewhere in this process, they have to be seen medically.
Okay. Assistant Chief Banfield, I'm wondering, as we try to wrap up some sort of conclusion to move on to our next item, where we're at and where we should be going. So listening to the discussion here, I guess I would say we've discussed or identified 4 things I'm pretty confident of. One is we got a big problem. The $10 million high utilizer mental health problems, that's not going away, and nobody's saying it has. We've got in theory, good model that's being used elsewhere. That was the case before. It's still the case today. Maybe some questions about the paramedic versus EMT and the need to justify the upgrading to the paramedics. We've got a pilot program that we did serve people in need, and so it was a success in that way. From your department's perspective, it was a success, but overall it was not a success because of the billing issues, problems with our partner, et cetera, et cetera. And then going forward, we've got funding issues. Short term for sure, just to feel more comfortable about who's getting paid, everything, but especially long-term, right? Because we don't want to create false expectations on the council, in your department, with your employees, and with the community, that this could be a forever deal unless we're more confident about it. So those are some big questions. What do we go forward? I think we're probably a little nervous at the council level from just saying, okay, go for it, given all of those questions, right? Nor do we want to pull the plug on something that still is promising and has shown at least some good results. So in this world between not wanting to just give you the full green light and not wanting to say, let's jettison this program, what's the interim next step process? Specifically, I know that you've expressed a desire to meet with individual council members. Given the complexity of this, I would highly recommend that in small groups, but I would also recommend written analysis, because these things are complicated and nothing is as clear as when it's put down on paper, right? And then we can have a chance to get back. But those are my thoughts. How do we move forward to keep you moving, but without going off a cliff, put it that way? Go ahead.
I believe, I think the next steps are, so we get good clarification and trust into this program, it's just having some groups of 2 or 3 with all the council people. That way we can work through these processes, and then we can bring these back to you guys, and you guys can vote on are we going to continue to do business the way we do in our community, or are we going to choose one of these models? And again, some of this was based upon the data we pulled and how other communities are doing across the country. I feel we mirror Spokane quite a bit, and that's what they use as a paramedic model up there. And we're right behind them as far as our growth, spread, and mental health issues. So we're following that model.
Okay, and is the RFQ the next step? And that's a big commitment, I would say, because that's creating expectations. Is there a way to get more of these questions answered in a written form, have these meetings, maybe see a draft of this RFQ before it goes out? And would that be okay with the department? Got any problems with that? Either at the administration level or the chief level, and I know I'm speaking, I don't want to pretend like I'm speaking for the other council member, I'm just speaking individually, but.
Yeah, I believe that the next step would be, to really dwell into this RFQ and make sure that, there's some pieces in there with the supervision of the clinicians on a daily basis to make sure that this is a success.
Okay. Any other questions and on this topic? Councilmember Kenny?
I'm just going to make one more comment. I think we need to get our budget in line in the fire department before we start stepping out and looking at things that are going to cost us in the long run. And I understand, and you started with a plan to begin with. The plan that you're looking at is probably going to be one of the most costly plans in the future. It's going to, there may be grant money to begin with, and we're going to get stuck in the long run. I think there needs to be a lot more thought into this, but I think, Chief, I think we need to get your budget in line before we start going out in the other area. Thank you.
Okay, further comments on this before we do want to open up for public comment on this item as well. So, in fact, let's do that, Council, and if anybody wants to wrap up after that. But everyone's heard the discussion out there. If anybody would like to comment publicly, this is your opportunity. Just ask that you give us your name, address, and keep comments to 3 minutes.
Social, yeah. Name,
Sherelle.
address, social, driver's license number, all the fun things. Hi, my name is Sherelle Garding. I'm here with the Rimrock Foundation. Council members, thank you for being here. Thank you for seeing me. I did bring copies of our termination letter that were sent, if you guys would like to see them. I also have our final crew dashboard, which does have the data from inception through crew ending on how many clients served and what that looks like. So if you'd like them, I certainly have them. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. So first and foremost, let me just say, number one, working with Chief Banfield and the Billings Fire Department has been an amazing experience. Rimrock Foundation is forever grateful for the opportunity to do that. I saw, me personally, I went out with the crew team in the car, responded to calls. I saw personally over and over that Chief Banfield would go above and beyond for clients. When we were backed into a corner and didn't know what to do next, he would come up with a solution. So huge shout out to Chief Jason Banfield for that, and for the EMTs that worked with us as well. I enjoyed every moment of being out with them and working with them. I think it was a wonderful collaboration, and we're very thankful for the opportunity to have done it. You guys mentioned a lot of the things that came up as concerns and reasons why we terminated from the program, from the pilot program anyway. One is staffing. My huge concern with hearing what Chief Banfield's proposal is for Model 3, it's virtually identical to Model 1, which is the pilot program we just ran, and didn't work very well. One of them was, and he identified it as well, the number of call volume that we received. So paying for a 12-hour shift for a clinician to be in a fire department and only going out on maybe 2 to 4 calls a day, so let's round up to 4, that's probably 4 hours of actually billing services. However, that's 8 hours of unbillable services, so that, when we're looking at productivity thresholds in business, that's not a sustainable business model. So then having funding to be able to do that. The other major piece of that, staffing. Mental Health America just did a survey, ranked Montana as number 16 with access to care, speaking to behavioral health. We have per capita 1 clinician for 280 people in need. So when we're pulling from that pool of clinicians, it's really hard to find clinicians that, one, will work late hours, work weekends, stay, and then the other piece of that we came up with staffing that Rimrock didn't anticipate is, I guess the difference between a mental health clinician treating their clients versus switching that mental health clinician to a first responder model. Walking them into a first responder scene, seeing the things that a first responder sees, definitely need a ton more training on what that actually looks like from a clinician point of view, because the culture is different and the training is different, and what they see is completely different. If we could figure out how to get dispatched to more calls that came in, that would be like the game changer. So when I was, just personally speaking, my own personal opinion, when I was in the vehicle, we would be dispatched to literally 2 calls per day. A few other calls that I thought, hey, maybe we should go on that. It was the EMT who had autonomy over deciding whether or not we could self-dispatch. The clinician was not able to respond. A very brief example of that would be public intoxication. The EMT would say, hey, public intoxication, we don't need to go over there. Me as a clinician would go, wait a second, that falls under behavioral health. And so really having to train that partner that we would work with on what behavioral health looks like, because mental health isn't separate from SUD diagnoses. And so I think that it would be beneficial to respond to each of those types of calls, but there would be times when we wouldn't. And I can't really speak to the why. That would be more of a Chief Banfield answer, but those were some of the things that I recognized while I was there. Reimbursement rates. Reimbursement rates would be fine if we had the call volume to sustain them. Reimbursement times. If there's truly a grant of $500,000 sitting out there, Rimrock still hasn't been reimbursed for July, August, and September. So if there's funding out there, and if you guys are going to partner with somebody else in the city, they're going to expect to be paid. So what's that going to look like going forward? What we fully support the crisis response model. We think that it is necessary in our city. We think that it can be successful, but I think without an evolution from the first failed pilot project, shame on us for not doing our due diligence. We need to evolve and do better. We don't want the city to waste money on something that isn't going to work again. So that's
very good. Thank you, Cheryl, for your time. Okay. Thank
you so much.
Any other members of the public like to comment on item number 1? Okay, nobody's coming forward, so we'll close the public comment period, and we'll move on to item 2, unless, council, there's anything else that you have for us. Not seeing anything. So thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 2, which is our Community Development 2025 Consolidated Plan. I believe our Planning Director, Wyeth Friday, is our presenter here. Wyeth?
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to start this off, and then Brenda is going to speak to some more detail on what we're looking at this evening. But first of all, this is a first follow-up to the work session we had with you all on August 19th, where we did a couple of things. We reviewed the current programs that are funded through our entitlement funds from CDBG and HOME. And we also had some conversation where you provided some input on potential either, priorities that aligned already with some of the programs we're doing, or some new ideas and things like that that we could potentially look at as we prepare our next consolidated plan, which is our next 5-year plan. We talked about that at that work session as well. We're in the process of preparing the new consolidated plan starts in 2025, goes to 2029, and is required per the HUD program, for the funding that we have to put in place. So the items, and we're going to switch over to that here in just a minute with Brenda, but we heard from you in August was housing development, domestic violence, family domestic violence, food security, housing and jobs projects, potentially partnering with HRDC, SEPTED, infrastructure, specifically in the sidewalk piece, and then housing programs that we're already doing, and then applicant match, which we actually want to ask a few clarification questions tonight on a few of those as we continue to move forward. Since we saw you in August, we've had a few things that have been going on, good, operationally, and also kind of good problems to have. One that's not a good problem is we had one of our staff members leave, and so we're trying to fill that position, and that's taken longer than we expected. So we have, including Brenda, we have 2 other staff, so we have 3 people right now in community development trying to keep things moving forward as we get into this effort with the ongoing effort with the consolidated plan. We're in an audit right now, and then the good news, but also the challenge is that we actually have 2 affordable housing projects that were in 2 sort of stages of review to be able to allocate funding to, which has never actually happened before that Brenda and I are aware of, where we've actually had 2 at the same time. We have a GL development project at King Avenue East and Jackson Street, the Skyview Apartments project, and we have what's called Lucy's Lofts, the Homefront project and Homeward project up in the Heights, which you've heard quite a bit about, currently they have those modular units up there, but the plan is to design those into some fourplexes. So very exciting. They both went to the Montana Board of Housing, both received some tax credits. The GL development project, the Board of Housing proposed to give them some tax credits, but not quite as many as they'd asked for. So they're actually kind of reassessing, but think that they can move forward anyway. And so that one was already in our review. Our community development board had seen it, and the Homefront project also received tax credits, and so that one is now in review as well. So great to have those. We're trying to work out how we can fund both of them and provide some funding in both of those areas. But those are all going on right now, in addition to moving forward with the con plan. And how we're gonna put that together. The other piece of this is that we are also, so as part of the sort of front end of the consolidated plan, we develop the applications for new projects and proposals right now that then will come through, and you'll see those in January, February, because then they roll into funding in our next cycle. So that's happening, and we'll hear from that. And that's actually partly why getting kind of as clear as we can on these priorities is important for that piece, as well as the con plan itself. And then also making sure through all this, and we talked about this in August, that we're making sure we're aligned with HUD and what HUD's priorities are for the funding, so we can make sure that these things match up. We're pretty confident of most of the items you brought up in August, that they work in that respect, but we have to we have to continue to show and make sure that we're aligned with HUD. Obviously, with the change in administration, we're expecting that there may be some changes. However, we think that those are going to take a while. And so we think that from what we're working on right now, we'll be able to continue into the spring. And if there's going to be changes, it'll probably happen a little bit later into the next fiscal year, depending on kind of how all that shakes out. So we're not thinking that things are going to all change kind of immediately, but that's on the horizon. We saw some similar things happen in the first Trump administration regarding changes to priorities and what HUD was focused on, but it took a while for that to kind of get into place. So with that, I will hand it over to Brenda. She's going to talk about the schedule for the con plan that we're looking at, where you guys both, tonight again isn't an action point, which is the point of this. It's to get some bounce off a little bit more on the priorities that we heard from you in August. And I know you're also planning to adopt your strategic priorities here next week. That's on the agenda. So that's all kind of in alignment. But then moving forward, some clarity on a few of those things, and then also what it looks like when we're going to be coming back to you as we step through the rest of the process. So that is our intent tonight, is to kind of both clarify a few things and also share with you, okay, here's the schedule, here's the pieces that are going to fall into place as we go into the new year. So with that, I'll have, Brenda walk through the second slide. We only have 2 slides, so we're trying to keep this as focused as we can on these topics and go from there. So, thanks.
Thank you. Brenda.
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, I'm happy to review with you a proposed timeline that hopefully incorporated the majority of your expectations and suggestions. The application window that we would start for the first year of next year's consolidated plan would open in December 6th, and they would be due in January, mid-January, it's typically, for us, we always try to do a 6-week time period for applications to be out. Then we want to call out in the application guidebook that City Council has a specific interest in funding housing development, family justice, and domestic violence projects, food security, housing and jobs, and then we will work with applicant organizations if they apply through the next couple of months in order to process those applications. And crime prevention, of course, infrastructure and sidewalks. And that at present, the only instruction I really have is, can we look at some kind of an applicant match? And the only thing I can think of is that maybe we need to put in a preference for applications that provide match, so we actually get an idea if they're, because I don't want to turn off their willingness to apply by saying yes, it's 50% or yes, it's 25%. So we can kind of gauge what they're willing to do to implement those programs and projects. And I think that all of those those specific things we can support data-wise as needs in the community, of course. So through February, March, and April, we would do, there's a few different things that have changed in our consolidated planning process. So I'm going to need to gather a little bit more information from service providers outside of what we already have done for the home ARP program and the allocation plan there. We're looking at public engagement using social media, other outreach activities, and then staff and board task force presentations through the spring. And you can kind of see that this, I'm just kind of looking at different phases of interface here, so you'll kind of see how it all works together, hopefully. It takes about 400 hours of staff time to write the consolidated plan. I've written this 2 other times in the current format for HUD. And we're getting our best draft outline online for the public comment period, which is 30 days by March 28th. And then we would have about 31 days in a public comment period. And then we would submit to HUD by May 15th, which is their deadline. So on the Community Development Board side, actually we have 2 board members here. Allie Pastor is also here from our Community Development Board, along with Rebecca Knoll, our chair. On a February 4th meeting, they would review the applications that were submitted. They would get site visit assignments for external applications. And some even new board members like to visit our internal programs too, to see how they work, how they run. And then we would go over the consolidated plan structure with them. Yeah, I have a little bit of time to get that together because I'm still learning about a few new things there. We would hopefully have drafted findings by their March 4th meeting. We could review recommended strategies and priorities from the board perspective, discuss the applications and their site visit responses or results. And then on April 1st, they would do an overall consolidated plan review because the drafted con plan would be online. And they would make recommendations for budget items then. During the city council interface, our memo would be due February 6th. We can do a public hearing prior to the application or the release of the drafted consolidated plan. So we would look at those comp plan requirements, review the applications we received, and then take public comment on additional community need. And then the memo is due on March 13th for a work session by March 17th, where we would look at drafted findings, our Community Development Board strategies and priorities, and how those would mix with the council strategies and priorities. And then the council final action would happen on April 28th. So I think that, did I hit all the components or am I missing any pieces? Yes, sir.
Okay, are you open for questions?
Yes.
All right, Councilor Kenny, Councilor Boyette, and Councilor Rowan.
Brenda, this is good. The question I have for you is, when you have your community development board meetings, do you think that when you have your drafts that you guys are discussing, that you could send us a copy?
Sure. I probably won't have a full document ready before the March 28th deadline. I think
Sure.
I have to piece things apart, but I'd be happy to send you the,
If you'd send us what you're
drafted
talking
recommendations.
about with,
Sure.
if we get that ahead of time, so then if we could fit it in, we could come to your meeting.
Wonderful. We'd love you to come to the meeting. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And Kevin, you could just alert me if Councilmember Tidswell, Shaw, or Nice raise their hand. Councilmember Rowan? Or, I'm sorry, Councilor Boyette. Councilmember Rowan?
Thank you, Mayor. Are we just like a spider with a web? Do we wait for people to come in and give us an application, or are we proactive saying, hey, here we are? And if so, have anybody so far said, I'm going to be applying in December?
We did get some interest from a site visit from the YWCA last year that they may apply for their, for Family Justice Center, some renovations on that building. We do send out the application and we do publications in the Billings, no, it's the Yellowstone County News. I forget the name of that. Yeah, that's the one. And we also send emails to big listservs, including all the social service organizations in town. And then we're available for consultation at least up until a week before they're due, because trying to give somebody technical assistance the day before the application is due is impossible. So we end our technical assistance about a week beforehand, but they can we can consult with anybody that's interested. So we do our best to do outreach in order to get applications.
Thank you. Councilor Rowan?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're making progress here, Brenda.
Oh, good, good.
The thing that concerns me is still this issue of us taking final action without seeing response to public comment. I really just struggle with that. Optimally, I would like to see a public comment period, and then council have a chance to see the draft where the comments have been documented and responded to. And I know it makes you anxious to push uploading until the last minute, but there is still one business meeting on the 12th between the 28th and when you have to upload. And I'm just wondering if there is a way for us to think through a process that would allow public hearing to be held, comments to be taken, documented, responded to, and then council signs off.
So, so you would rather not have the public hearing on the 24th, you're saying push it forward onto March 12th?
No, I'm talking at the end here. So we have the draft, the public comment on draft closes on the 28th, April 28th, with a meeting here. But then council's expected to act that evening to approve it without having seen that public comment in the draft has been documented and responded to, which would be pretty standard administrative procedure. And I'm just wondering if there's a way we can solve that problem, noting that we have a business meeting on May 12th. And I know that causes you anxiety to be that close to the deadline. So I'm just trying to come up with some solutions here. How can we see a draft that actually incorporates public comment and staff response to it?
The one thing that makes me anxious is having the full report done before March 28th.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It's just, it's such a huge report and it takes 400 hours and we have.
No, I get it, but I still am uncomfortable approving a document that should have public comment that ends on April 28th, but we haven't seen that the comment has been documented and responded to.
Are you saying you want to push the final action for council into May?
That's what I'm wondering. And, but I recognize again that there's an upload challenge here and I don't want to be disrespectful of that process. It really bugs me that we're signing off on a document that doesn't reflect the final public comment. So I don't know if you want to go back and think about it with Wyeth, talk it through, how we might do that. But I just think standard administrative protocol is that the final document is approved with public comment in it.
Okay, so there's one very specific challenge that I'll run into. If you are meeting on the 12th, then I have a couple of days to get any changes that you would want to have.
I hear you.
And that would be throughout, because you can't just change one section, you have to change everything.
Correct.
So I think we might have to move the public comment period backwards and then try to figure out how to release me of some other obligations in order to get the drafted,
So will you guys
the
think
best
through it?
draft to move forward, to move it backwards.
Talk it over a little?
Yeah.
That would be great, thank you.
Very good. Councilor Aspenlider?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm just going to continue to encourage you to be proactive with the Family Justice Center folks. I mean, we are going to come up on looking at remodeling that space and building out the Family Justice Center. And at least for me, and I'll just speak for myself, that is a high priority that we need to work collaboratively and creatively to try to fund to get built out. And this is going to be a key piece to making sure that that happens. So please be proactive with those folks and reach out to Taya and try to figure out how that can be engaged instead of waiting for them to come to you.
Yes, I think we have been proactive with them. We actually even did a site visit. All three of my staff went there, including me. So I think we are proactive with them.
Okay, thank you, Brenda or Wyeth. Not on this process so much, but I testified the Housing Board for the Lucy Lofts project and also the jail development. What percentage of the dollars requested did the jail development project get, either in dollar amounts or percentage, if you know?
I thought it was nearly, I think it was $4.6 million or so that they did receive. So it was,
Okay, that would have been pretty close to their asking then.
Yeah, I believe, and Brenda may be able, so we had GL Development come back to us at the Community Development Board meeting we just had a week and a half ago, or I guess 2 weeks ago now. But yeah, they requested 5.6 if I recall, and they got 4.6. So basically $1 million or so, I think, short. And so that's where they were looking at how they could adjust to fill that gap and continue. Because they really, they feel like they can do it. But they were trying to look at, I think the main thing they were looking at from what our conversation with them was adjusting a few of the units from up to 3-bedroom versus 2-bedroom, and some things like that, so they could potentially have about the same number of units, but have some that were higher, larger families, but also then obviously the rent could be adjusted up a little bit. But anyway, that was the discussion. So it wasn't a huge, it's all huge, I guess, I shouldn't speak for them, but it was still within feasible.
Okay, very good, thank you. Any other questions before we open up for public comment on this item?
If I could just ask
Yeah,
one
go
other
ahead.
thing, and I saw Councilmember Owen kind of agreeing when Brenda was asking about the applicant match. If we're keeping it, like she said, where we're asking them to make sure they provide what their match is, so we can look at that as part of our review versus, we're not trying to say it must be this percentage or that percentage, but that we want to know and we want them to share with us that. So I guess that was the only thing, just making sure on that. Because the rest of those items seemed pretty, like we understand food security, we're talking with Riverstone Health and some of the folks that have been working on that really hard in South Billings to understand what's been done and where that's at. The other items, I think, were pretty clear. And the 2 city items are clear. We're working with Parks on SEPTED and also talking to Public Works about sidewalk replacement program, or where that might work. But just that match idea of like,
You just want to
show us.
clarify that it's a mandatory request for information, but not a mandatory target to be met.
Like a percentage, I guess more of just saying, show us what you are proposing for to bring to it.
Anybody disagreeing with it, Councilmember Braun?
No, I don't disagree, but what I thought I heard Brendo say is that we might actually establish a preference or a prioritization. If you bring
Right,
some
I
back-
guess, I'm sorry, yeah, no, that part, just not if you don't hit 30 you're
I think
out.
that's a great way to start.
Okay.
Yeah, I really like that idea. Good job.
Okay, very good, thank you. I don't see anything else on this, so we'll open it for public comment on item number 2. Is there any comment on the development of the Community Development 2025 Consolidated Plan? If so, please come forward. No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment period on item 2, move on to item number 3, our fiscal year 26 technology replacement plan. Our IT Director David Watterson is our presenter.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to present the FY26 Technology Replacement Plan. So, get us so that we're on track here. Oh, do we? Perfect. So each year, the committee gets together and there are representatives that represent or help with the technology inventory and plan in each of the different areas. As you can see, there is 10 different members, each member representing likely a department they work in, like Amanda Skewis. Public Works is a very large, lots of divisions, to Denise Bowman handling 3 different areas and so forth. This year, several members of my staff, including Damon Combs, who's our application manager, assisted me in putting this together. The plan looks for a mechanism to replace technology, to encourage it. It looks at items that are 3 and more years of life. Most of them are 4 to 5 years. We do annual reviews on what types of PCs or models or laptops and make recommendations for what they should plan for and the replacement and the dollars. We look at standards, cost benefits, regulatory requirements, best practices, et cetera. The funding, unlike the next plan you'll hear, is the equipment replacement plan. That plan is funded a little differently. In this case, the departments fund the replacement of their items out of their own budget. There's no advanced planning unless they set aside for some larger items that may be part of this plan. In FY26, just a couple of slides showing, highlights of some of the things that we'll be replacing. 109 general PCs, that includes 54 laptops and tablets, 3 application servers, some copiers and printers. There's some larger systems in GIS. Base station allows, we have actual equipment in the landfill that gets its coordinates for GPS off of it, along with all the surveying and different items. A flow-through analyzer at the wastewater plant or water reclamation facility, I think is the more current term. Paratransit at MET, an atomic absorption, one of those at the water plant. They have some very specialized lab equipment. It comes cyclical through and is a little more expensive. One of the things we do in our plan when we can is, as items get to be a little bit older, but they still have useful life, we try to recycle them, if you will, out of maybe higher intensive production environments into the Senior Citizen Center, into the Crime Prevention Center, some kiosks, things like that, to get more life out of computers. I will put a notice in. Cybersecurity best practices have led us to narrow the number of years that we allow like a computer to be on our network. Once a computer gets about 6 years old, it's had several years where the manufacturer no longer supports the drivers and the firmware. So we're no longer, we're moving away from allowing 7- and 8-year-old computers to be on our network. Some industries like banking and higher things like hospitals, I believe, are on more of a 3 or 4 year. And so we'll keep our eye on that. The other thing that we're having trouble with that is causing us to get rid of some of the older computers is something the whole world's facing this year or next year. We'll face it, and that is Windows 10 is going end of life, end of support. Windows 11, that ends on like October. I can't remember the exact date, maybe the end of October. Windows 11 is what we're transitioning most things to, and some of the 5- and 6-year-old computers, just quite honestly, will either not run Windows 11 or so slow and it's not worth putting it on. We're looking and encouraging replacements. So some of this is not exactly the TRP, but it's related to some of our replacement cycles. In FY26, we have about 41% of our expenses are regular routine, smaller dollar item, computers, printers, fax, scanners, things of that nature. 59% are larger items. One of the reports you got in your packet is a little more of a description of those larger items and exactly what they are in their dollar amount. This slide gives us a breakdown. You can see through and see where by department where the TRP expenditures or plan replacements are. As Public Works is larger, they're a large department for one, and two, I think they had some cyclical replacements, some of which were on that one highlighted screen. As we look at comparisons over the last few years, you can see that the trend has gone up, and this year we're actually down about 400,000. There was a large 911 replacement last year that rose up the cost from FY24 to FY25. FY26 didn't have as many of the larger items. And so again, in replacement cycles, we do see these types of trends. If I were to trend it back, you would see that there were some higher years before FY23, so it does kind of roller coaster a little bit. As we look forward, again, you'll see that in FY27, we see the cost go up, projected over FY26, and FY28, it almost doubles. It's almost, it's 4 times what FY26 is. And what happens in the natural process of this is as they go through, they'll go, well, this printer or this device or this software, we can get another year out of it. So it might get bumped from one year to the next. And then they'll look at it and say, well, yeah, then instead of FY27, I'm going to push this thing to FY28. That's a natural process. There's a point of diminishing returns where they can't push things too far because then they get too old, they become hard to support, out of, manufacturer support, maybe bounce against our cybersecurity policies. But there are some notable larger items in out there, and like FY27, there's a million in there for public safety replacement. Again, it got pushed to there. That's likely to be pushed again, depending on the timeline and decisions made in that situation. In FY28, there's almost 2 million in 911 radios. That's probably the biggest player in that, doubling that year. And there's almost 970,000 projected in server storage, including our high availability systems. And again, I believe some of that will be probably pushed, maybe it'll happen in FY27, maybe pushed to 29. Some of these things move around. But you will probably see an upward trend over the next couple of years. So with that, any questions?
Questions for David. Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Boyette.
David, I have a question. Do you only handle the equipment, or do you also handle all the software for the city?
Yes, all the software, all the equipment, the phone systems, mobile computers.
I'm just trying to understand, is IT and your department responsible for purchasing software and make sure it's all compatible? Or are departments doing their own and then you're brought into the discussion later?
So, Councilmember Kennedy, to answer your question, yes, we are involved. Sometimes we set the standards or the guidelines. So if you're talking about desktop software or document imaging software or AVL, things of that nature, we look to see where we can utilize similar solutions for multiple departments. If we were talking about Microsoft and Office 365, we set the standards, Adobe, Teams, things of that nature. As we get to larger scale software applications, then the departments are the experts in their area. So we play a role hand in hand in helping them identify and what are the frustrations with the current software. We're the liaison to their current software vendor. We help to resolve problems, help to support the vendor and the department, make sure they're all on the same page, identify training opportunities. And in some cases, there's really a need for a different solution. And then we help the department transition to identifying their needs. Again, they're the ones who understand their needs. We help with the RFP process. The departments usually take a leadership role in the RFP process. We help to analyze or provide feedback as they go through.
Do you have to approve of it? Do we have a rule in the city that you have to, IT approves of any software or whatever that
Yes.
people purchase?
Yes, they are not allowed to go out and purchase software systems without
Have you-
involving IT.
Have you been involved with this whole water billing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Boyette? No question there. Councilor Bernice? Councilor Bernice, go ahead.
I'm sorry, so you Boyette first.
Well, I think Councilor Boyette waived.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Dave, for a while, we've been wanting to see the public safety software updated. There's been a lot of needs, I think, in the police department to have their data a little bit more easily accessible, things like that. And you mentioned there's $1 million in the budget. It was being moved back. Can you give us an update of where that process is?
Councilmember Neese. So let me speak from my perspective, because the public safety group as a whole may give you a slightly different answer. So first of all, there's no money available. I shouldn't say there's no money available. To my knowledge, there's no money budgeted. In my opinion, $1 million is not going to cut it. It's not enough. It'd probably be more like $2 million. I believe that we've had a new staff person come in, and that's nothing to say anything negative about the previous person who was handling public safety. They have established a good, it's just kind of, sometimes a refresh helps, and that refresh brought openness to work together. And I believe that all of the public safety entities and IT are working together better now than we were. And they're open to the ideas. And we have seen through understanding what their frustrations were and coordinating with the vendor and some training opportunities and just some fresh eyes on the environment, where there's been a tremendous amount of progress with the current system. So with that, from an IT perspective, we don't see an immediate need to just go out and change it. We feel that there needs to be further analysis and group discussion between all of the entities, the fire, 911, police, sheriff, jail, on identifying what their real pain points are. I believe there could be a need to replace the system. And if that decision is made, my IT opinion is that the city needs to hire a consultant. Because this, as much as Councilman Member Kendi, we are very experienced in migrations and conversions and things of that nature and have handled a lot. Public safety is obviously high risk. It's really important that the systems work. You've got not only first responders, but citizens or anyone engaged in any part of what they're doing, relying on the systems. We feel that a third-party outside vendor needs to be brought in to help do the analytics and work with IT and work with the public safety departments to then develop an RFP to help do the software selection and help overall management. And again, I believe in my IT staff and I believe in our abilities, but this is the scope and size and really the risk importance that we feel that is what we would recommend that the city do moving forward. That does add cost to the overall project, but this is much bigger. To put it in scope, utilities is a big conversion, what we're going through and some of the pain we're having right now. But public safety and what it encompasses is much, much larger.
Okay, thank you very much. So if I heard you correctly, you said you think that they may be able to utilize the current system more effectively. Is that what I understand? There's things that they're looking at that they can find ways to do. For instance, when I asked the chief for a report on whatever type of crime, it's not going to take 2 officers, 2 or 3 days to produce a report? Is that what we're talking about, solving or fixing some training issues on how to use the system? Or are we talking about, some other, as far as how they're going to use, keep the system alive for longer?
Councilmember Neese, this is my understanding, that we have made a lot of progress, that as pain points have been identified in efficiencies and just streamlining some things, that there's been a lot of progress that has reduced some of the pain points that they've had. IT nor the police department feel that this is going to say, we're nowhere near a point where we say we don't need another system. I know the police department, the feel we have gotten is that they understand that they're going to be utilizing the current system for a while yet, and so they want to make the best of it. But I think there's still a desire to change out the systems. Now, to answer your specific question, we would need a specific request to be given to us, like from the police department. Here's a situation, and maybe the situation you're talking about has been vetted and looked at and analyzed, and the answer is this is very difficult. But if we have, from an IT perspective, a specific request, that gives us something more solid that we can, look into and try to provide or answer that question. But without that, we're talking,
Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you. Other questions for David? No one online, none of our council members online are raising their hands. Okay, we'll open for public comment, but before we do that, Chris, you want to chime in?
Kevin, anything you want to say before I?
So, just following up, Councilmember Neese, I did meet with, kind of going down David's line, as I asked him to contact the company that we're working with and tell them those pain points, have them come on site. I met with the company themselves and asked them to meet and do kind of an audit process of where we were having troubles with our software system to see if there was issues that we could deal with the current company that we're dealing with. With that, what I asked staff to do was then to, keep track of what are we still having pain points? Are we still having issues with the software? What are those? And about 6+ weeks ago, I did meet with the chief of police, the sheriff's department, because our law enforcement software system, it entails a bunch of different agencies. So I got a big group of those together. We were still having some of those issues that we want to try to work through and stuff. But I do anticipate at some point we might be coming in. Do we need a different system? I know what you're asking is sometimes if we're not capturing that detail you're looking for, in a certain method, if it's just in the narrative or something, it's very hard to draw out, and a new software system might not help us do that. But some of the simpler things that we're looking at, there's a potential that either training on our current software system or maybe looking at a different system might help.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, that any of the public safety would be, conversion effort would be in fiscal year 27, not in the current CIP, in the current equipment replacement plan.
I think that's correct. Those larger.
That's what the bar indicates.
Yeah, the larger ones were out a few years.
Yeah.
But the piece I wanted to add, and it's, quite high elevation, but it's illustrative of the conversation. Software, whether it's the utilization of the software we have, the training of our personnel, the dedication of personnel, the number of FTEs or individuals that we dedicate to utilizing it, I think are significant short, mid, and long-term budget conversations. Especially in these areas where it really matters, either on the public-facing side of the house or in our CGL analysis of efficiencies across the criminal justice system. All these software programs we're talking 7 figures to buy them, and you're talking about significant resources that need to be considered year over year over year, not just to pay the software vendors to have the licensing, but to actually have the personnel inside the organization who are trained to utilize it and maximize it as a resource. And that's just an area that, candidly, I don't think we've as much focus on as we will need to into the future if we're going to meet not only your expectations, but the public's expectations as outputs that people want to see out of data-driven decisions in this day and age versus what we did 5, 7, 10 years ago. So, thank you.
Very good. Councilor Boyette, and then we'll have public comment on item number 3, the technology replacement plan.
So I go to task force meetings, and we used to have the police department would give us charts and graphs about the crimes in the area, and they haven't been doing that. Is that because of the police department, or is that because of IT not being able to give them information, or do you know that?
Councilmember Moya, I'm not aware of why that hasn't continued.
Okay.
I know our GIS staff has worked closely with the police department. I know they had a staffing change. They had an individual, a crime analyst, that was really good with GIS, but I know our new GIS manager's been working with police. So again, I'm not sure what exactly has changed or when that changed. But it should be, if they were able to produce it before, there'd be no, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of why they wouldn't be able to produce it.
Councilmember Boyette, I will add that our crime analyst did leave, and we are in the process or have put a new person in place there. So that's probably why you haven't been seeing them if it's been in the recent past.
Yep. Very good. Thank you.
Mayor and Council, just one other thing, because I think perspective of timelines is important on a system as big as the public safety. If we were all to get in the room together and decide to get a new system, even without the help of an outside agency, it would probably take 6 months to develop an RFP. You advertise, you find a solution. Almost anyone going to replace or tackle a conversion of this size would take 2 years to prep in order to actually make the migration to a new solution. So regardless of what the solution is you would move to, it's not a quick thing. So when you asked about FY27, likely, even if we were all on board today to make that change, this would be a FY28 and maybe over 2 years, depending on how the cost or the payments are spread out through a contract. But this probably wouldn't be FY27 unless it was maybe a down payment on the process, but.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like something we better get started on. Is there any public comment on item number 3, the fiscal year 26 technology replacement plan? Any public comment on item number 3? No one's coming forward. Close the public comment period. Council, it's now a shade after 7:30. Give me a thumbs up if you want to take a break, a thumbs down if you don't. Or I'm not seeing any thumbs. So the default will probably be we'll just keep going. So, but it is a work session. If you want to step out, obviously feel free to do so. Next item up then is item number 4, fiscal year 26 equipment replacement plan. Our rolling stock, Nick, is our presenter here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nick Westberg with the Fleet Services Division, and I'm here to present our FY26 ERP. So our ERP committee members this year are Andy Zeller, Matt Hoppel, myself, Josh Smith, Kyle Foreman, Jamie Bratley, Derek Miller, David Cardello, Scott Emmerich and Amanda Skewis, Mick McCarthy, Tina Hoger, and Brandon Schmidt. Equipment replacement plan overview. So the ERP is a mechanism to replace and fund the city's equipment. Equipment with a useful life of 3 years or more and a value of $5,000 or more. The ERP is based on a 20-year plan, and in this plan we establish guidelines for review consideration based off mileage, hours, and age. We do establish further replacement costs and salvage values. We do have consistent funding through annual contributions, and we do have additional upgraded equipment or provisions for additional upgraded equipment known as SBRs or supplemental budget requests. One thing to note here, I believe it was you, Mr. Mayor, last year asked me and Andy to consider changing the $5,000 value to a $10,000 value. That's something that we did take back to our committee. We voted on it. It did pass. So next year, this will be changed to $10,000. These are just some pictures of some of the equipment that we have eligible for replacement this year. I believe there are 8 sanitation trucks, 3 sweepers, a man lift truck, we have a Vector, some big earth moving equipment, and then just your general automotive and SUVs. Equipment transfers. So these are the pieces of equipment that are eligible for replacement. And we basically can find another home for them rather than trade them off or sell them. Just like Unit 7997 will be hopefully transferred from DNC to wastewater, or Unit 1710 from airport to facilities. Now, these pieces of equipment, when we transfer them to a new department, because they're our asset, we still have to track them. They do go back into the ERP under their new value or the new purchase price. And we do put them back in the ERP on a 1-year term. Just for the simple fact is they're aging pieces of equipment. So they are eligible for replacement every year. Okay, deferred equipment and replacement. So at the beginning of this process, we started with 247 pieces of equipment eligible for replacement. Through our process, we were able to defer 191, leaving 56 recommended pieces of equipment for replacement. I want to talk about that deferred replacements a little bit. Just like that last slide we talked about, a lot of these pieces of equipment are going back in the ERP just on a 1-year deal, or because they're aging. They're an aging piece of equipment. So FY26 replacement summary by department. So on the left, we have all of the departments that are participating in the ERP this year. To the right of that is the amount in the plan for this year. To the right of that would be our SBRs, or supplemental budget requests. Those two added together equal the city funding, minus any grant funding there might be. And then we have our totals at the bottom. Replacement by department. This slide just basically it's just like every year. Sanitation, solid waste is our big spender, followed by street and traffic, and then Met and Belknap. One thing to note here, library does have a pretty big chunk. That's that bookmobile that they're asking to replace. That was the piece of equipment that was on the cover. Equipment replacement plan. So this is our 5-year plan. So again, it shows this year we're at around $7.5 million for replacements. The way the ERP is structured, it always shows that the next year is always a heavy year. This number is down considerably from last year. We really worked with the departments this year and moved some of the equipment out 2 and 3 years that wasn't going to be replaced. So government fund replacement. So this horizontal line represents the funding for the ERP. And then our zigzag line basically represents the replacements. We want to try to stay on that horizontal line the best we can, which we are doing. You do see in 2037, there is a pretty big spike. That is due from, I believe there's 5 or 6 fire engines that are all slated for replacement that year. Non-governmental, so this slide just basically illustrates the departments that do not pay into the ERP. There's no horizontal line because there is no funding. These departments basically use the ERP as a budgeting tool. Questions?
Question from Boyette.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. So one example, you had a yellow pickup truck, and then you had an example of the busmobile. What is the criteria? Is it age or mileage or wear and tear? Is there a common denominator that you say, okay, it's time to get rid of it?
So it's all 3 combined, basically, whichever one comes first. It would be age or mileage or, age or mileage, basically, is what we.
Councilor Boyd?
Can you give me examples? Is it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? I mean,
So-
if I have a pickup truck at home and I keep it for 20 years, it may not have any mileage on it and still be a good truck.
Correct. So in our ERP book that we send out, the last page of the first section has all the ERP guidelines on it. So for a regular pickup, light duty pickup, it's 7 to 10 years or 100,000 to 130,000 miles. And there's all of our equipment is in this book. So.
Nick, if I can follow up on that, I'm always surprised by the percentage that are deferred.
Yeah.
In this case, it's fewer than 30% of equipment that's eligible for replacement is actually replaced. High 20s or mid 20s%, it looks like. And in one sense, that's really good, right? Because it means that they're technically eligible to be replaced, but we're getting more mileage out of them. That's literally mileage. But, and I don't know that it matters, but we always have this, next year's this huge number. Because we're deferring into that. And you said that you got those down more realistically this year, which is good. But it always just strikes me a little strange, or we're kind of fooling ourselves because we have these numbers, they're technically eligible for replacement. We know we're not going to replace them. Is there any harm to that? And should we just be being more realistic about how long stuff is going to last, meaning it's going to last longer, and adjust the schedule that you just referred us to? Add 10% to everything and so that we can be more realistic in our budgeting.
So, and that is an option. That's something that me and Andy talk about a lot. The one thing I could say, different departments use the same piece of equipment in different ways. So if I look at this here for graders, it says for years, it's 10 to 20 years or 7 to 12,000 hours. So sanitation owns a grader. It's unit 0206. It's a 1995 grader and it has 7,400 hours on it. So it's 1995, it's almost 30 years old. Street department also has a grader, unit 1205. It's a 2016 with almost 7,000 miles on as well. So if we do, push our replacement numbers back, it wouldn't hurt some departments, but then some departments, for instance, like street department with this grader, it probably would maybe jeopardize their replacements a little bit.
So might have to be some fine tuning because they're only driven to church on Sundays.
Yep, and we can go deeper into that, like a Met bus is driven, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. Recreation has a bus. They have 4 or 5 buses. They obviously only get driven on, in the summertime. So.
Yeah. All right. Other questions for Nick? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Nick, I noticed under that chart that you had for, I got to get back to the top here, the replacement guidelines, you have computer equipment, which we just heard the TRP, which is under technology. So do you guys actually monitor computer equipment as well, or is this something that just happens to be something you don't do?
What slide was that on?
It's on your equipment replacement guidelines. So computer equipment is listed as 1038.
Oh, in the book.
Yeah.
So we generally do not.
Okay,
Any
so
of the
that's something
police
that you may want to take out of that, so it's not confusing, that the departments don't know, that make sure they don't put computer equipment in there, that's under the TRP, not under your ERP. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then I've brought this up in the past. We hear about our parks department and playground equipment is not listed in here. And I've asked about that. Has your committee talked about having the playground equipment listed in here so we know, because we know there's a useful life on this equipment and it has to be replaced after a period of time. Has your committee talked about adding the park's the park's playground equipment in here so that you can be listed in there knowing when it has to be replaced?
No, we have not talked about anything.
Okay, it would be nice, maybe the committee could at least discuss that, to maybe add some of that so we actually have track the equipment that needs to be replaced, so it doesn't, we don't hear about how it's being torn out because it's beyond its useful life, things like that, so, thank you.
Very good. Anything else for Nick? Chris?
Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council, I would just say that's a perfect question for the capital improvement plan, but I don't think it fits into the equipment replacement plan unless we want to change the definitions of what we do there, right? Because it's, for the most part, it's rolling stock.
Rolling stock and equipment, it's not all rolling stock.
Sure.
Okay, nothing else? No ordinance online, so thanks very much, Nick. We'll open up for public comment on item number 4. Is there anybody who'd like to be heard on item number 4? Seeing no one, we'll close the public comment period and move on to final item of the evening, item number 5, our capital improvement plan. We got till 8 o'clock. That'll give us 12 minutes. Go ahead, Andy.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. All right, I have before you this evening the FY26, FY30 Capital Improvement Plan. My slideshow is only going to go, or presentation is only going to go through very high level. I do have slides on each department if there's questions on, in more detail, but I don't intend to go through them unless you want to. We have been to 2 Budget and Finance Committee meetings to present this plan. You have all received it via email as well as it was attached to the staff memo. So let's get in. The document is also online. I'll have a website at the end of this for anybody who wants to see, but the document itself starts with just high-level summary, and then as you work deeper into the document, you get more into the detail. So this is just really more for the benefit of the public, or if you're navigating a printed version, it may be helpful. But starts with an overall summary. Then the next 3 sections, it's the same exact information, just formatted in 3 different ways, however you want to consume it. Projects by department, the next section, projects by accounting or budget fund, and then the next section, project by anticipated revenue or funding source. And then after that, which is the majority of the book, it's broken into department and each individual page, or each individual project page is in there. So a lot of information, hopefully helpful for you to identify what it is that you're looking for. The capital improvement plan is a 5-year forward-looking plan that you guys adopt every year. It identifies infrastructure and facility needs. These are not rolling stock, not equipment. And then it helps prioritize funding. It kind of directs us to say, yeah, we want to pursue these grants, or we want to start setting aside funding for this project, or getting rates set so that we can borrow money for that project. Things in the plan are items that cost more than $25,000, have a greater useful life greater than a year. These would include new construction, rehab of existing properties. These do not include vehicles, which is in the ERP, common repairs and maintenance, or operational items, or plans anymore. So here's the full 5-year plan by department. These graphs are just pulled from your book, so you've got them. Not a surprise to anybody here that Public Works makes up the majority of the CIP plan year over year, then typically aviation and transit. Those are capital-heavy departments. You aren't going to see a lot in here for police and fire. Those are operational-heavy departments. We do have quite a bit in FY26 and 27 in the Parks Department this year, and we'll go through some of that as well, but those are projects specifically related to Amon Park, South Park, and then a pretty substantial grant, the Community Change Grant that we applied for. That's what makes those up. They're normal, ongoing replacement projects, irrigation systems, playgrounds, such like that. Those are pretty consistent at about $1.5 to $2 million a year throughout. Here again, just another slide, the 5-year total by department. Again, you see the transportation projects, utility projects, they're not just lumped together as public works here, but large transportation projects and utility projects and an airport, as I mentioned. This here shows the anticipated funding source for all of the projects. This is a change from what's in your book. I found an error. It was just in labeling, but the gray area, user fees and charges, I think in your book says charges to city departments, but that is not correct. That is user fees and charges. These are primarily utility rates and assessments on property taxes. And that's what makes up user fees and charges. We have some state revenues, special assessments on there as well, and then a good portion funded by grants. A lot of that is in the airport, where a significant portion of their capital projects are FAA funded. And then 14% by debt. So some of the major projects, well, I'll use this as a slight stopping point. The plan is just that. It's a plan on, where do we see priorities for capital investment over the next 5 years. While there's no budget authority attached to any of this, direction is taken that, yeah, we want to pursue these grants for these projects, or we're planning on doing, I think the West End Reservoir, it's not in here, but, a few years ago was in here. We needed to get rates such that we could pay debt on a big project like that. So we start putting things before you to take action so that we can meet these anticipated construction projects. So with that, I've highlighted some of the FY26 major projects. If this plan was adopted as approved, we would start by building the FY26 budget with all of this in there. Same with the ERP and TRP. These kind of set some foundational guidelines for starting the budget. That way we're not debating every single line item when we come back next year. We've kind of got some buy-in, so to speak, for, hey, here's where we're going. Some of these projects, again, continuing airport terminal rehab. This would be the exterior front and ticket counter areas. As I mentioned, the Amen Park Rec Center turf fields. This would build the infrastructure, build the site development, and the sports court element of that. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. The Community Change Grant Fund. This is the $15 million EPA grant that was applied for. If we are successful, these projects would start coming online, or I guess you'd start seeing bids and design next year on that. This would include improvements at North Park, as well as some transportation projects and enhancements in the eBird. And then South Park Pool, kind of tied in with that Amen Park project, anticipated based upon an expansion of the South Billings TIF district, which is underway. And then the major transportation project this year is Rimrock Road, 54th to 62nd. The one specific item that I would like you to provide staff direction on this evening are these South TIF projects. At the Budget and Finance Committee meeting, we talked about these. I did not make any changes to the CIP from that meeting to today, but based upon what direction you give me tonight, I would like to bring back the CIP for adoption in December with these projects changed to reflect whatever direction it is you want to see here. Currently, the CIP shows $10.4 million. It's that FY26 column for those three projects: the rec center, the turf field, and the South Park Pool.
And just to clarify, when you say the CIP, you mean the proposed fiscal year 26
correct.
CIP, correct?
Yep, thanks, Mayor. The proposed CIP in front of you has that FY26 column, and that totals, what's that, 33 million, 34 million. In your FY25 budget that was adopted, it included $1 million out of South TIF funds for the rec center design. It also included $400,000 out of the Parks and Recreation Operation Funds for South Park Pool design. The discussion, and so that total, the FY25 budget and the FY26 CIP is $35.6 million. The SBURA's recommendation, a few months ago, was to put forward $31 million for those three projects. The reality is there's probably only about $30 million of construction funds either currently available or able to be borrowed in that South TIF district. So there was discussion on, hey, we need to really tighten this up, reconcile it, say, what do we want to be planning for these projects? And to do it now is the time to do that, rather than later when we get there and find out, oh, we need another $3 million and we didn't plan for it because we didn't take the time today. So I did put together, after talking with Mike, a staff recommendation here that gets to that $30 million. That would be a total of $21 million for the rec center, not planning anything for the turf field at this point in time, and then $9 million for South Park Pool. That would get you your total $30 million. What that would mean is the CIP would be adjusted, because we have the FY25 amounts, we would adjust the CIP for $20 million for the rec center for construction. The $1 million that's in there today, in the budget today, would stay there. And then $9 million total for South Park Pool design and construction. There is, like I said, the $400,000 of the Parks and Operation Fund, or Parks and Budget, or Parks and Rec Operation Fund of $400,000. If the direction was, hey, don't use that, let's use TIF funds for the design once the expansion happens, there would be $400,000 in the Parks and Rec Fund for other projects. Consequently, you could continue to use that and take South Park Pool to $9.4 million if you wanted to as well. Does that make sense? Because the $30 million is only South TIF funding, that blue column there.
You ready for questions, or you want us to wait?
Last slide. Just, and
Go
then,
ahead.
then let's go.
And then we'll go back.
All right, I only here, so I just wanted to say, if you go to billingsmt.gov/CIP, you can find the currently adopted CIP, find the proposed CIP. There's options on there to submit comments if people want to. Again, I am looking for direction specifically on these projects, but opening up to you for any direction at all. And then we'll be bringing it back in December. The plan right now is to bring it back in December for adoption. Now I'm ready.
Okay, thanks very much, Councilmember Basselmeyer and Councilmember Kennedy.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Andy probably knows exactly the slide that I'm going to be asking to talk about.
The only slide that has good content?
Right, the only table with data.
I've got more. I'll leave that to Kevin to watch for them, so sorry. All right.
So we kicked emails back and forth today about this, and this data seems like it's swung all over the place over the course of the last 6 or 8 months as we've been talking about it. And my recollection of this conversation as we were talking with the SBURA in the development of this stuff was that roughly $20 million was going to be dedicated to the rec center, and that included the turf. And then 10 million, they started out with 8, I believe, in their initial budget that they showed us for South Park Pool. And we encouraged them, hey, you better be planning for 10, because that's where we're going to go. And that was how we got to the $30 million number, which was your recommendation like 6 months ago as we talked about, hey, what's the capacity of the SBURA? So in all of these conversations, that's what, at least everything that I've participated in, those have been the numbers. Parks then put out an RFP that had a $20 million budget for the Amen Rec Center. So having these numbers kind of fluctuate in the CIP, I think is something that we need to get our hands around, and I'm glad that we're going to talk about it tonight. But we definitely need to set the tone on this now for these projects. Otherwise, these budgets are going to get wild, and we don't have a great track record as it relates to this stuff in particular, of being able to keep a handle on that. So I guess I'm asking council to be crystal freaking clear with what we're setting the budgets for these projects as we move forward, about ready to sign a contract for the rec center next Monday. And if we are going to say collectively that, hey, this is going to be $23 million, then we need to be sure that we know exactly what we're getting. But to start, this was $20 million that included that 1.8 million for the turf field. And now we're at 23 million without the turf field in the CIP. And so this stuff doesn't jive. And at this point, my perspective is it is certainly appropriate that the council sets its expectations very clearly before we kick these projects loose, so that we at least start with some level of parameter set by the council. Otherwise, this is going to balloon and turn into a goat rodeo. So my recommendation to council is to stick with what was originally discussed. And, you know, I know the mayor's going to talk about, well, private funding this and private funding that, and all that stuff is all add-on, right? That doesn't mean that we set these budgets artificially in our CIP with the hopes that we're going to get public or private funding. Not the case. Let's set the cap at what we know that we can and will fund. And then if there can be private raise after that, super. So my recommendation, and I'll make a motion to that effect, is to set the budget for the Amen Rec Center at $20 million, including the 1.8 million in the turf field, and set the budget for the South Park pool at 10 million. And that gets us at that $30 million staff recommendation. So I'm going to make that motion.
Councilor Rathline, if I can, well, first of all, what the motion has to be is what's on our agenda. So in the CIP is what you're talking about. You're not setting a budget for a project, because that's not on our agenda today.
In the CIP.
In the CIP. If I can ask for clarification on the turf pool, or I'm sorry, the turf component, that was included, which would bring us beyond 30, that would bring us to 31.8.
No.
So run us through, if you got 20 for the rec center.
Got 18.2 for the Amen Rec Center.
18.2, okay. And then you would include the turf field, the 1.8.
Yeah, just change those blue lines is all.
Okay, well, you've got a motion before you as to how to adjust the CIP, then to 18.2 for the rec center, 1.8 for turf, and 10 for South Park pool. Okay. Okay. All right, and Councilmember Kennedy made the second on that, so that will be the framework for discussion. So, Councilmember Kennedy, did you want to speak to your second?
When I had the opportunity to talk to Sabura last week, Dick Zier, one of the things that we went through was the budget and where we were at. One of the things that, looking at it, we had the Amen Park, the all-weather turf, was talked about 6 months ago when we went to a meeting with the Sabura folks, and that we would make sure that that turf and that field got built. The South Park pool, I have some real concerns. People were talking about 10. People were talking about 16, all of that. We also heard that we would have to come up with fundraising and raise some money. We don't have a means to raise any money, so we need to come up with a figure that's going to work, and then we can design, build, and get the project done. So I would really like to see that project go forward. Once we have the timeline, Chris and I talked last week, the timeline is probably, we'll be seeing in April, possibly being able to expand the Sabura and being able to look at the South Park pool project. The rec center construction project, it may be, it's a lot higher than what we ever talked about. And that's why I would go with the 18.2. With that, I think that's enough money to do the courts, to be able to do the project. And I've been getting a lot of calls on pickleball and with the courts and all of that. So I think it's doable, and it doesn't break the bank, and that's the direction I'd like to see.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll follow what we had recognized before, Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Owen, and Councilmember Shaw, and Councilmember Neese. Or I'm sorry, Rupsis, Shaw and Rupsis.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a question for Director Friday. In order to expand the TIF, it's been previously, when there has been expansion of the TIF, there has been a public outreach. There's been surveying. The surveys that were done for the South Billings incorporated the public, people of the South Side. What surveying has been done for the expansion of Sabura?
Councilmember Joy and Mayor and Council, no surveying at this time. And I guess just to expand briefly on that, what we will have to do per state law and past experience is notification of the property owners within the existing district and the proposed expansion area, which I shared with you all a few months back on that presentation, but no surveys have been completed.
Additionally, how many surveys or how has public opinion been solicited for the replacement of the South Park pool? Has there been, I know that the master planning has been done, has there been any surveying or reaching out to the public around that area of what kind of facility they would like to have? If you're looking to do a facility in South Park, has there been any surveying or public outreach to see what the public would like in South Park?
Councilmember Joy and Mayor and Council, I'd have to have Director Peg answer that. We haven't done anything on the planning or South Urban Renewal District side.
Thank you.
Mayor and Council, so we originally started that process by meeting with the Southside Task Force and finding out what their guidance and how they wanted to proceed with this. And then during the designing process, there's always community input that we would be getting at that point in time to help us fine tune that design to meet the community.
So the assumption was it was going to be a pool?
The assumption was it was an outdoor pool, correct?
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because around South Park, there are quite a few elderly housing units where a pool may not be what they would actually desire for the park?
So Mayor and Council, the feedback that we've been getting was the community needs a pool because that is an underserved area for outdoor recreation, and then the kids, would be a heavily utilized facility if it was improved and upgraded.
Thank you. And I have a question for Director Friday. I'm sorry, not Friday. Zeller, sorry, Zeller. Sorry, Director. So my question is, what would the base be setting the properties in what could be a boundary of to include South Park? What's the base going to look like?
Are you talking specifically about the tax increment base?
The tax increment base for that area.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question dollars wise, but if the district were to be expanded, any new properties added would come in at the base. There would be no increment from those new properties. The 30 million of capacity is all within the existing district.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Councilmember Owen and Shaw, Rupsis, and Boyette.
Mayor, I had sought recognition initially on a different question. I do have a question about this, but I know both Councilmember Shaw and Rupsis were ahead of me as to the current amendments. So
Okay, if that's okay, we'll move on.
I would just like you to come back to me on this amendment.
Okay, absolutely. Then we'll go to Councilmember Shaw and Rupsis, and then Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted a clarification from the move-ins on, so in Andy's chart, what I'd seen is really that's the borrowing capacity of the cap that we can borrow from the TIF, but my understanding is they will also have some cash on hand. So what I'm trying to discern here is the motion trying to say that's a hard budget, or that's the total amount we're willing to borrow for this project if Sabura comes and says they have, for example, $500,000 in cash to do something specific? That would be in addition to that. Does that make sense?
So it's a question for the movement.
Yes.
And so Councilmember Aspenlighter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Shaw, that is a hard budget of money out of that TIF district. I think it's important that we continue to leave money in the TIF for private investment and economic growth activity. I don't want us to get in the position where we're starting to creep into pulling cash on hand that we should be using for TIF activities with private business development to encourage redevelopment and growth inside that district, either as it sits today or expanded. So my motion is to set a hard limit. Anything above and beyond that would be private money.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll support the motion. I just wanted that clarification so I fully understood kind of exactly the direction we're giving staff. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay. I just have to raise we don't have a parliamentary question or Gina here, but the CIP is what the CIP is. And it's never been determined to be a budget. It's never had these kind of extra asterisks added to it. People can state their opinion about how they're going to treat that, but is that kind of addition to the asterisk in order here? And that's my question. Councilor Asplund, you want to address that?
I think it's absolutely pertinent that we set the expectations for staff to deliver on. I mean, that's the whole point and purpose of these work sessions, and it's the whole point and purpose of what we're doing in the CIP. And from my perspective, like I said, I want to be crystal clear as to what the expectations are so that if this doesn't go as planned, that it can't be that there was any kind of wiggle room left by the expectations of this council as to what we're expecting with these two projects very specifically.
Okay. It just seems the CIP gets amended every year and maybe even between years, but that's argumentative, and I want to give other people opportunity to weigh in. So we left off with Councilmember Rupsis and then back to Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out that in the discussion September 3rd, Sabura did bring forward numbers. We don't have to just kind of rely on our recollections of what these were. They presented $22 million for the Ahmed Park rec center and infrastructure at that park. $1 million out of the current FY25 budget, and then $21 million bonded. Also had $1.8 million for the turf field. Those were not combined. And then they had $7.2 million for South Park Pool. So that number has obviously changed, but I'm very hesitant to support just throwing out numbers here without getting the feedback and the input from those people, the people pushing that project and coming up with those estimates. I think that's not good practice for us to just throw around numbers willy-nilly. I think that we should stick with the $22 million that was originally estimated for now and refine that, certainly no higher, but refine that down as we get more information about the design as the site master plan is put together, about what requirements can be fit within the budget as they come up with a rec center design. I also just want to point out that number did include the infrastructure as well, which will take up a decent chunk of that budget. It's not a $22 million rec center. It's a whole lot of infrastructure at that site. plus as much rec center as we can get for the rest of the remainder of this budget. I do agree that it's important to set the budget and say we're going to work within this. I just don't want to just kind of throw numbers out, just because we want to set a cap. I think I'd rather stick with the estimates that we've had thus far, and then if we get some further refinement, then modify those down as we can. But tonight, here, right now, I'm not prepared to support this.
Very good, Councilmember Owen and Councilmember Boyette, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you. Mayor, Andy, just a couple questions, please. So, just trying to pull a couple of threads here together. Let's say that council adopts the amendment and that we adopt the CIP. When we come to the budget cycle, when we come to executing on these RFPs that we're going to be hit, how firmly can we write in contractual provisions that enforce this kind of budget? And I mean, obviously we can write a contract that says anything that we want, but that doesn't mean someone will sign it. So realistically, what are the mechanisms available to say, listen, it's 20 million, period. And we don't want to see change orders or change of scope or a bunch of other nonsense. We really want everyone to understand that this is a hard cap. What are our options?
So I would lean on Director Pig or Melling to answer that, I think, in more detail. Their experience on construction is far superior to mine. The only kind of leading comment I'd make before I'll turn it over to them desperately is that I don't even remember after my stupid joke now. That the Parks Department is working on the design for the rec center. And so I think by setting some direction here tonight, I mean, you're going to guide that project, even though it's not in the budget yet. But you are going to guide that design starting now or within a few weeks. So I think whatever comes of this, certainly will have implications on projects that are not budgeted yet, but are being planned and designed.
So before you punt to someone else, let me just follow up on what you just said there. Between tonight and when we see the CIP for approval, can we get a little bit more project description into the CIP so that we're all clear on what we're budgeting on? What the infrastructure is, what the parking will be, what the size. I mean, can we get a little more robust in here? Because I'm real concerned. I think it's a very good idea to set this kind of hard project cap, and I will support this amendment. But I'm concerned then that behind the scenes, we start seeing things that for the public are critical, like adequate access, water, and parking, getting cut so that we can gold plate a basketball facility. And I'm really concerned about the cost of the proposed basketball facility here. So I'm wondering if we can get a little more meat on the bones of the project scope between now and adoption. Is that possible?
I will do my best, but I don't know
Okay.
how detailed it'll be.
So you can hand off
I
to.
don't know who wants to tackle the question on no change orders.
Mayor and Council, so Parks Department we follow a budget that is given to us. So you guys say a project can go for 500,000. We go out for bid with that. When it comes back, if they bid, $400,000, that's the budget then we work off of, with the remainder being a contingency. We try to always stay within that number. Now, sometimes things happen out in the field that we don't see or are unanticipated. I'll give you a prime example. We were doing the trail down through Riverfront Park. We found a soft spot in that area where we could not get it to firm up. We had to come back to you for another $100,000 to fix that soft spot. So, we do every effort that we can to stay within that budget guidelines, but outside of our control, something like that we have to come back for change orders, yes.
I hear you on that, but what I'm more concerned about is a scenario in which a project is underbid in order to get a project, and then is change order to try to get it back. And that's what worries me. How do we prevent that? How do we write a very firm contract that says, this is the budget?
So
do we let it for less? What do we do here?
Right, so Mayor and Council, I'm gonna defer to Debbie Melling on that one. I don't get change order after change order after change order. No, I get that. There you go.
Council Member Owen, sorry, I've been sitting a long time. So it comes down to writing your specs and your plans tight. So when we do a project, we try to make sure that everything that could possibly be interpreted one way versus another is in there and it's defined well. The better plans and specs you have, the less chance there is for those opportunities for change orders.
That helps. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay. Mike, I'm not asking you, I just want to give you a heads up, but I want to recognize the people that I've already recognized, but we got right into a motion without ever hearing any basis for the staff recommendation. I'm assuming that you're the source of that. So think about that. Stay there. Let's hear from the other council members. But when we're done with next, after Councilmember Neese, I'll ask you that question to justify those numbers. Councilmember Boyette, sorry. Thank you. Go ahead.
So Andy, I realize that the Suburra can borrow 30 million, right? That's their capacity at this point, give or take.
Combined with current cash, yes.
Okay. So, I was gonna say, so what? We don't have a Suburra that's bigger than what it is. Are we doing anything to start the process to make the Suburra bigger? What is our process? How long does this take? I mean, that's a real, no one's ever said anything that we're doing anything to make it bigger. What are we gonna do so that we can build a swimming pool down the road?
Mayor, Councilmember Boyette, Wyeth is leading that charge. We are working on the kind of initial steps. It's quite time intensive. As he mentioned, you do have to notify every property owner in the current district and every property in the anticipated expansion, as well as do an analysis to identify blight to determine that it warrants expansion, and public hearings as well. So I mean, the process is underway, but it is lengthy, and I don't know exactly where it's at, but I'll let Wyeth get into details there.
Councilmember Boyette, Mayor and Council. So I guess just first, I've been directed from Chris here just in the last few days that on the December 11th Budget and Finance Committee meeting, we're supposed to provide an update on where we're at with that. But I can tell you tonight, what I've been trying to do, the last meeting we had with you all was, if I can say, inconclusive, except that there was direction to find out more about the process and costs, because we are looking at having to have outside help to do this because we have other priorities that we're already doing. And so what I've been nailing down as much as possible is we have 2 consultants in the state that seem to be capable of this process. Getting the information from them on what the cost would be to both first do the blight analysis and get us to that point. And then if we were gonna have them, if we come to you, because there's literally a regulatory step at that point where you say, yes, we've determined there's blight, yes, we're going forward to create the district, that we know what the additional, rough estimates of kind of that cost to finish the whole effort. So I think right now, we'll, obviously report back on that. We need to sort of get the green light. If we're going to spend money from somewhere to bring that consultant on, then we have to make sure that gets approved and work with Chris on that. But then, yes, as Andy said, the time frame then is probably about 6 months. I mean, one of the things that's a little bit of a, 2 things that are a little bit out there. One is, the notification of all those property owners and then having a meeting to explain to them what's going on. That's going to take both time, and we don't know how that'll go. And then secondly, we'll be doing this kind of through the legislative session. However, so far, my sense is that the only piece of legislation that could be significant is the definition of blight changing, and I don't think it's significant for what we're doing. I think that it'll be okay either way. So I don't see that but it's going to be happening at the same time. So those are the things we're working with. So you're talking spring for sure if we start the finding of blight analysis and then get into the notification of properties here in the next couple of months.
Go ahead.
So Andy, when does the Suburra need to go and say, I'm going to go borrow $30 million? Do they need to do it by the end of this year so they can get the 30 million question?
Mayor, Councilmember Boyette, no, they do not. The timeline, so the ability for the city to borrow funds using the South TIF district as the repayment source, we can only borrow funds for as long as that district is currently bonded. And I want to say there's probably 18 or 19 years left on that. So we're limited on the number of years we can borrow, but each passing year that goes on that we don't borrow, we still collect that tax revenue. And so long as there aren't large projects that they get spent on, that cash is available. So when I mentioned earlier that there's 30 million in combination with borrowing capacity and cash on hand, I mean, you could collect these funds for the next 20 years, and you'll have $30 million cash at the end of it if you'd like, although the construction costs would have inflated significantly. But so there's not a timeline, I guess, to say we have to do this by June. It's just a function of when we get it done, and having that cash on hand along with what we can borrow.
But we still need to borrow money though, correct?
Correct. So typically the way that we'll borrow funds for TIF-funded projects are, it'll be in the CIP, then it'll hit the budget, and we'll start working at that point to get all the documents in order to borrow funds. And then when the project is bid, we'll try to bring the bid and the final bond documents to you at the same night, so they're either approved or rejected together, so you don't accidentally approve one or the other. Yep.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Neese, myself, and Councilmember Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, I don't know if this is for you or for Wyeth, but do you know if the Suburban Board has considered the expansion of the TIF district, and have they on board with this?
I don't know.
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, they're very aware of it, and they haven't taken a formal action because it's really not the point to do that. But the whole discussion regarding the various amounts of money that they, and again, they're advisory to you. They're not calling the shots. I just always try to remind everyone of that, including them, that's the variable. But they're very aware of this. They knew that in terms of the discussions of the rec center in general.
Okay. So through the process of expanding this TIF district, is there any point during this surveying of the residents that they could protest and stop the expansion?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, there's not a protest provision for that per se, but it's more of just, I'll give you an example. When we went through the Founders District effort a few years ago, 2018, and we got through the blight analysis, there were property owners who were not interested, and they came to you, they expressed that concern, and ultimately the city did not go forward with that expansion. But there's not it would just be what you hear from those property owners and their concerns, so.
Okay, and so
Yeah.
this $10 million for the South Park pool really depends on whether or not it goes and we expand the Suburban.
Yeah,
And
at this point, if you're putting in that you're getting $10 million from an urban rural district that that doesn't yet include that area, absolutely, because that's where, unless there's some other funding source, that's it.
So even though it hasn't come to a vote yet, where that's
Right.
the anticipation, it doesn't mean that actually, so if we vote, as the council vote against that, then this $10 million would just basically go away. Okay, thank you. I do have a question for Mike regarding this. And I would like to make a recommendation, as Councilmember Rups has pointed out, this is not the Amen Park Rec Center, it's a campus and rec center, and this is one of the reasons I think I was opposed to some of the things that's going on there, because we have a campus that we're building, and then suddenly we've got this rec center, but it's not a rec center, it's the campus, which I support. Mike, this $10 million, it was asked, as far as what they're getting a swimming pool, but we saw plans for a swimming pool, a lazy pool. So what is the $10 million going to get down there?
So, Mayor and Council, the $10 million, that's a number. We don't have a design. We just have some concepts in a master plan. So there's really not a defined what you're going to get. Under the South Park pool study, it kind of laid it out. I think there was an $8 million option, which was just basically a pool and a pool building. And then if you went to the $10 million option, then or $12 million option, I believe, then you got a bigger pool and more amenities. And if you went to the $16 million option, that's when you got the vertical slides and things like that. So, but it's all concept at this point in time. If you say that we want to do a $10 million pool, we'll come back with the design of that. And we will get the community input at that time to help us guide through that process of what the amenities they would like to see and what ones they could choose and what ones they would have to take out to get to that $10 million number.
Okay, and then on the campus and rec center, 18.2 million, again, I don't know how much of this is going to be the campus portion and how much of this is the rec center, the courts. And I understand it'll be more than just courts. Is it going to, I don't know if it's going to include pickleball, is it going to include tennis? I mean, what else is going to be included in this facility? So we don't really know. And so do you have any idea how much is going to go towards just the campus of this 18.2 million?
So Mayor and Council, I do not have an exact answer for that. Again, it's a concept. And so during the design process, they will come back with a 100% design of the site plan. And that will, at that point in time, they will have an accurate number. We heard some estimates coming back that said about $5 million would have to go into site, parking lot, bringing in utilities, access points, things like that. That would leave us about $15 million for a court facility. In the court facility, then, you're basically limited by the size, and so the bigger you build it, the more of those amenities you can add in. But if you get a court facility, you can put pickleball in there. It's very difficult to play tennis in a facility like that. It's a hard court.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. You're now where I was going to go. So the staff recommendation here was something of a compromise, I guess you'd have to say, between Sabura's numbers. So compared to the motion that's now on the floor, the staff recommendation was at 19 million, I believe, for the campus and building to go into the CIP. And no, I apologize. It was 21 million. So the motion is at 18.2. So there's a $2.8 million difference. The turf staff recommendation was 0. The motion is at 1.8, which was the original number from Sabura. And then the staff recommendation on the South Park pool is for 9 million, and the motion that's now on the table is at 10 million. These are in the vicinity, but there are still some significant differences, I guess. How did you come up with the staff recommendation of 21 for campus and building, 0 for turf, and 9 for pool? What went into the thinking to get you to those specific numbers?
Yeah, so Mayor and Council, there's a lot went into that. First off, Dick Zier came and stood in front of you and gave you all a presentation and had a $20 million budget for a swimming pool, $20 million for a campus and a court facility, $7.2 million for a pool, and $1.8 million for the turf. After discussion, it was pointed out that we needed closer to 10 million for the pool. So we started working towards that number. When I talked with the Sabura people, they said that they would rather forego the 1.8 million for a turf field and put that money back into a recreation campus. And so that's how we got to the money. Now, once we got to talking with Andy, we found out we had even less money than we had originally thought. That's where we came with the compromise of $21 million for the court facility in the site campus and then $9 million for the swimming pool.
Okay. And without the turf, what's the consequence of that? They end up with 0.
Correct. Mayor and Council, they just stay playing on a natural turf field. The turf field exists currently. The natural turf field exists currently. They're playing soccer on it. When we put in an artificial surface, it would actually replace grass fields. And so you would lose some grass fields and you would gain a turf field.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Kennedy, and then Councilmember Espenlater, Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Neese.
One of the areas, and looking at the, I talked to Dick Zier last week, and this is the rec center he had at 21, Amen Park he had at 18, and South Park Pool at 7.2. The 7.2 is not going to do it, and we know that. It has to be at least 8 million or above, because you can't build the South Park Pool on bake sales and fundraisers. So either we at least go with the 8 or even higher. We all sat down at the different meetings with Sabura, and talked about making sure that Amen Park had the all-weather turf field, because that's been a big thing going on, that they needed the two fields to go forward. The rec center and the construction in the area, it was set at 21. It could come down, and with some value engineering, you could get it, that it would meet all the needs. The one thing about it is that when we talk about the South Park pool and what Councilman Aspenlinder is talking about, is there are other projects over on the south side that are also interested in expanding, and those are businesses. And I would like to say that the whole south side goes to the stores and participates all throughout Sabura and helps those businesses grow. And so when you look at that, that's how they grow, and those are a lot of the people that go to those areas. So, you know, they should be included, and we should be looking at the pool. We all went and looked at the pool last fall. It's terrible. And when you look at the bathrooms and all of that, most of you would say, well, I wouldn't let my kids go there. And so we should be going forward and trying to get this done. My biggest concern is, how long is it going to take to get the approval for us to come back and finally get it approved to expand it? We did these with the county and didn't have a lot of problems. I remember downtown when they made it smaller, didn't take hardly anything to do. So I'm asking that we look to try to get this done instead of dragging our feet and saying there's a legislature and everything else going on. Let's get it done so we can have something for the people that each of these groups that are looking for to spend out these money. But we also need to make sure we have the funding for some of the other businesses that want to expand.
Councilor Aspenlinder?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Director Pig, what was the budget amount that you put in the RFP for the Amen Rec Center?
Mayor and Council, the budget amount was $20 million.
So why are we now increasing that?
Mayor and Council, we're not. It was originally, there was $1 million in there for the design and $20 million in there for the construction. That's how, there was $1 million in for the design in this year's CIP. And this is for fiscal year 26, that would be the $20 million ask.
I guess I just got a comment at this point. I mean, you had a group that included a budget for $20 million, which included the $1 million design fee for a total cap of $20 million. And this is what I mean when I talk about the creep. Unless we start setting hard budgets, this is the kind of stuff that starts to happen. And it's why I'm steadfast in setting a hard budget so that we all know what the expectations are. And that we hold everybody accountable to that. So I don't need to talk anymore on this issue. I'm looking to vote and move forward, but I think this is exactly the point.
Okay. Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have a question. The turf for Amen Park, this will be Amen Park's second turf field. They already have the one. How it has been in this, I believe it has been a part of the discussions for the Sabura for quite some time, a number of years, to build a second turf field. Has the Amen Park, the nonprofit, ever been asked for a match? Sabura paid 100% of the first field. And I was wondering, has the nonprofit ever been asked to put any money forward towards putting this second field in? Thank you.
Mayor and Council, They put aggressively aside money every year for the replacement of the field. And so their extra dollars that they budgeted go in towards that replacement so that in 5 years, turf fields wear out. And after a number of years, they don't want to have to come back to council and say, hey, our turf field is wore out. We need more money to do that. They're actually aggressively putting money aside every year for that purpose. So that's where their extra funds go.
Do you have a follow-up or?
Follow-up, please. Thank you. So I understand they put money aside for the replacement repair of the first. Have they actually put up any kind of match for a second field? That's what I'm asking. Have they actually planned to contribute towards a second field, or is that expected to be 100% Suburra? That's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Mayor and council, they have not offered to put up any additional funding towards that unless with Melanie Schwartz's fundraising efforts, she's had an opportunity to speak with them and see if they've wanted, but they have yet to this point expressed, yes, that they would be adding additional funds.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Mike, I'm glad this came up in conversation. I forgot to ask about this. So the turf field, what is actually they're going to get there? Because the other turf field has lights and stands and that. So is this just the field, or is it going to include lights and stands as well?
Mayor and council, so this one would be a mirror image of the one that's existing. So it would be, and they're actually discussing it with the APDC group. They would like to expand it and make it just a little bit bigger so that it could start hosting college soccer events. But it would be an identical field. Now, the lights, when we did the original field, we put the light poles in on the back side so that it could have additional lights added to it so we don't have to pay for a double infrastructure there. So we'd only have to build half of the lights out.
Oh, that's great. Mayor, I think Amy and Park does a great job with our community, providing a service of recreation, and one of the most fiscally responsible agencies we see running facilities like this, along with Part 3, I think. I appreciate Councilmember Asselmeyer adding this back in, because I think this needs to be in there to be developed in that area that's been long awaiting for that. And I think that'll bring a lot of development opportunities with that field adding there, especially if they're going to bring some college tournaments and things like that in there. I'm going to support the motion, but I'm really hesitantly supporting it because the $10 million, I'm still not so sure we should be expanding the south district over to the south side there. But since that's not going to be an issue right now, I'll support it regardless of that. I do believe, though, if it is approved, based upon what some of the numbers have been put out there, I think $10 million is going to be needed. I am really not. I'm in supportive of the Amen Park Recreation Campus, but not the center. And so I am really concerned that we've lumped this all into one thing. We don't even know who is going to run this recreation center. And we're planning on, spending who knows how much money, because it's been all lumped into building the campus and then the rec center. So we don't really know. This is the problem that I cited earlier by throwing two different projects into the same bid, into the same approval. I think this should be split out. And somehow along the process, we've got to split this out going forward. But I will support this motion, but I will adamantly try to oppose this rec center portion of it as much as I can until we figure out who's going to run this. And so we're not just adding more dollars to a parks department that can't afford it, their infrastructure today. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Council, I think we should move to a vote soon, like now. I'll just comment. I'm going to oppose the motion, not because if it passes, we can't live with this. These numbers are all in the vicinity. I support the general direction of indicated in the motion, moving forward with the development of the campus, development of a basketball facility. The turf is good, but I will, if it fails, I'll bring a motion to stick with the staff recommendation because it is what I've heard, the recommendation of Suburra, and they're the ones who are quite knowledgeable about the numbers. it's a real concern that we don't know what these numbers are. And this is totally conceptual. And this is the capital improvement plan. It's only a conceptual plan. So, I do care about what Saburo, who's been looking at these numbers, thinks. I care about what staff thinks. And so I want to honor their recommendation as much as possible. I also am concerned that the turf field is 100% funded, just like the last field. That's great, but I don't see why the hockey ice facility community should come up with $6 to $10 million and zero capital dollars from the soccer community. Sabura is also not here to weigh in on this, and that's a concern. And also this hard budget language that's been kicking around. I'm concerned about what we're committing ourselves to, at least internally. And so that's I'll vote against it. But again, if it passes, we'll work our way through it. If it doesn't succeed, I'll bring the motion or somebody to adopt the staff recommendation. Other discussion on the motion before we vote on the motion. Okay, the motion then on the table is Councilmember Aspenleiter's motion. Just as a reminder, correct me if I get it wrong. The CIP, we direct staff to adjust the CIP to include $18.2 million for the combination campus and ball facility. $10 million would be the South Park pool number. $1.8 million would be the Amon Park turf number. Okay, Councilmember Aspenleiter nods as that's correct. So if in favor of Councilmember Aspenleiter's motion, why don't we go ahead and just do a hand vote so we get the numbers right. In favor, Councilmembers Gulick, Neese, Owen, Kennedy, Aspenleiter, Boyette, and Shaw. If voting in opposition.
And Dan.
Oh, and Tidswell, thank you very much. If voting in opposition are council members Joy, Cole, and Ripsa, so the motion passes. And so at least, Andy, now have you the direction that you asked for. Okay? Now, that was a lot for one little piece of the CIP. Where are we at, council, on everything else in the CIP? Councilmember Owen?
Just wanted to ask my initial question that I'd sought recognition for, and I don't know, Andy, if you want to handle this, or Debbie, or Wyeth, it doesn't matter to me, but we had a conversation, I think in one of our budget committee hearings, that the Expo Park bridge has disappeared. And it was my understanding that was an unintentional omission and it would be brought back. Now, you had said you haven't made any changes, so I'm just wondering if we're going to see it back or not. It's my understanding that this had remained on the planning, in the planning list for future funding so that we wouldn't lose track of it. And this is, I think, the first year that I've seen it go away under transportation planning.
Mayor, Councilmember Owen, it is presently not in the CIP.
I'm aware.
As proposed. So I guess I don't have much to add beyond that other than.
Am I misremembering? I feel like we discussed this and maybe Debbie had said, oh, we didn't mean to do that because we always keep it in there in the furthest out year. Am I?
Well,
did that just happen up here?
I know that you guys discussed it at the meeting. I was not at that Budget and Finance Committee meeting, but I was made aware that that topic was discussed, but I apologize. I don't know what any direction or results coming out of that were.
Did you want Debbie to comment?
Well, she wants to. She's kind of giving me facial signals like she doesn't really have anything to add.
She was going to build it on her way home tonight.
That'd be great. Yeah. I think it's important we keep this project in here. I understand it's unfunded, but it's important that we not lose track of it and that we continue to seek fund for it. So it would be my hope that it could come back in there, but if there's a reason for it not to be, Wyeth, feel free to come pick a fight with the Heights.
Councilmember Owen and Mayor and Council. So, and I wasn't at any of these meetings. So what I would tell you is I know Andy and I had some conversations and had met with Michelle and the eBird on this, and it has been in the CIP for many, many years. And I guess when we were looking at 5 years out at this point, given what it looked like, it wasn't, and we were expecting that some kind of development is going to happen to see this occur. That is why we were we decided at that point to not include it in this, currently in the CIP. Obviously, your point about anticipation is correct. It's just that that one has been there and we haven't even been able to apply for, I mean, if you look at our 25th Street Bridge, there's grants that matched it and stuff like that. We just haven't had anything like that for this. So that was the discussion that we had with eBird and at least two of the staff during that.
Well, I think we might need to have another discussion about it because it's an important project. It's been conceptualized for a long time and it continues to not get the attention that I think it deserves. So maybe we just have another conversation between now and adoption.
Yeah, and if I can add, I mean, one of the things we did talk about, which is another piece that could be a step that way, is that there's been the amount of at-grade improvements out there is basically zero for many years. And when you are, especially out there at big events and the fair and such, people are trying to cross, that there's definitely some potential even in the short term to do something beyond what's there to get a comfort level across that area, even if it's not separated initially. So that's still a thing, and especially something with MDT that we really need to pursue. So.
Well, I'd love to help you keep pushing it. It's important that we not ignore that that's a very unsafe intersection and also could be a much more beautiful intersection. So I don't want it to go away from our planning process. So maybe let's just have a follow-up conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Other items relating to the CIP? Are there any other items relating to the CIP?
I just have one question.
Question for Councilmember Kennedy.
In the CIP, Andy, we have Cottonwood Park. We just had Cottonwood Park that came up as a master plan, and there's now 400 and something thousand for Cottonwood Park. Why is that when we were told that it would be $25 to $30 million to do that park?
Yeah, I'll let Mike get up here to answer that. We do have some cash in lieu funds for that park, I believe still, but they're quite limited, and that's probably
Does
why
it have to be going to that park?
The cash in lieu funds do, yes.
Okay.
Let Mike talk about that.
Mayor and Council, yes, and so in the master plan, it said every year we would come forward with a proposal to find a way to fund some amenities or whatever, and with Cottonwood Park until we got it fully developed. There is the money that you're seeing in the CIP is cash in lieu funds. Those dollars are setting out there. That's to do a design and any construction that we can through phase one. So phase one would be that northern portion north of the ditch.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else CIP related before we close the discussion? Well, I guess we haven't even had public comment. Not seeing a lot of members of the public. We don't want to miss that on our agenda, though, and I apologize for not doing this earlier, but are there any members of the public who wanted to comment on item number 5? No. We'll close the public comment period. Just for the record, there wasn't anybody, there was not a city staff member here earlier. Anything else? I don't see anything, so we'll call that a wrap on item number 5. Chris, highlight upcoming agenda items of council interest.
As was stated in the past, and we bit off a very significant chunk tonight, right? And then going into the meeting, I was worried we had too much, but we got a lot done, which is the capital improvement plan. We're not adopting it tonight, but we got this. Ultimately, is coming for your adoption in December. That's the single biggest thing for the end of the fiscal year, end of the calendar year, not fiscal year. So that's all I have on future agendas. I would like to give, with your permission, Mayor, and you tell me the appropriate time, I do just want to do a reminder of all the things that are going on in the Community Development Department, to be clear that we're not just dragging our feet on the suburban expansion. There just is a ton of really important land use projects going on there. So if I could point them out, I think it'll only take seconds, and it would be a good reminder for us.
Chris.
West End Heights Neighborhood Plan, just finished subdivision regs, thank you. Compliance with Senate Bill 382. development review forum that we held last week, and there'll be more of those sessions on customer service. That work is going on. Applications come in every day. We have no choice. I mean, that's good news for us. We have to respond to those applications. Projects we've not gotten to that we want to get to is Skyway Drive, the economic development, land use plan, and utilities. We want to keep that moving forward. This Suburra expansion, anytime there's an eBird in Suburra projects that come through for funding, they go through Wyeth's office to be prepped and brought in front of you guys, the interim planning commission, and though we're so excited and grateful to have Wyeth back and have Anna now in Monica's slot, we had two very significant hits this past year relative to staffing impact in that department. So none of those are excuses. I just don't want people thinking we're dragging our feet relative to trying to get this stuff done. There just is a lot of critically important things going on in this department. So thank you.
And you left off the cost of services study.
Yes, I'm sorry. And I'm sure I left off some other things.
Yeah. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, is the Lampman Park part of this land?
That's back to your, that list that's been out there for a decade of possible properties for sale for people to redevelop.
So do I need to do like an initiative then to bring that up a little closer?
Although I would say initiative, strategic planning, priorities, at some point here, we can just keep adding things to the list. There are just limited resources as to what the timeline is to get to them. So the Suburra expansion, the point is Suburra expansion is important. It's time sensitive, but so are so many of these other things on the list. So that's all I'm asking for is some grace relative to that push.
Understood. Thank you, Councilmember Owen.
So Chris, speaking to items of council interest, earlier versions of the plan for tonight had included the updated CPSM study, which I now see has been kicked to January. What happened?
Correct. We had a miscommunication on mine relative to Wayne, the consultant's availability for tonight, and that was the best night that worked for them and us. So we're in the first meeting in January because I thought it was critical that CPSM be able to present as well as staff.
Okay. Is there a reason we can't see that report earlier so we can read it, review it?
No, I think we haven't gotten the final yet. Okay, we should, once we get that, it's not a problem to share it.
Super, thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any items of council discussion? Any public comment on non-agenda items? There's none. We are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.